When I grow up, I want to be an NBA basketball player.
When I grow up, I want to be a famous soccer player.
When I grow up, I want to be a professional football player.
When I grow up, I want to be a professional cheerleader.
How many of us grew up wanting these exact same things, yet we find ourselves accepting less than we dreamed of as a child? Trauma, adversity, unfair circumstances, you name it. Totally understandable, yet, is it really? Here at I'm 1% Possible, we explore the unsung heroes, the everyday, unassuming individuals that you may have never heard of. But they all have one thing in common. When life struck them, they struck back.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to I'm 1% Possible. Now I am joined by my other favorite Ranger, First Sergeant retired, Ed Abdella.
Ooh, Rangers lead the way.
He was born in the Bronx. You can tell by that attitude. In 1964, I'm curious. Obviously, we're going to get to this here in the interview. You moved to Connecticut. That East Coast life is a different one for sure. I'm born and raised on the West Coast. What I found interesting, I've frankly never met somebody with this level of gumption. So when you were 13 years old, you wanted a racing bike. When your father said, if you can show me that you're going to put in the work, I will get you a racing bike. You took that as a challenge, which most kids today will probably go to their room and cry. And you went out on, I'm assuming this is just a typical BMX type bike.
Yeah, so we had everybody rode Huffies back then. And when I was
Right.
a younger kid,
Back
probably
when they were made in the US and actually a good brand.
oh, absolutely. And so I rode this Huffy and I remember all my friends were starting to get these Peugeots and other beautiful, 10-speed bikes. And I went up to my dad and I said, Dad, I really want to get a racing bike. I'm 13. I think I was 12 or 13 years old at the time. I think I was 12. And no, I know I was 12. I didn't hit 13 yet. That's kind of a big age. But at any rate, he told me, he said, look, I'll buy you a bike, but you got to put in the work. You got to show me that you're serious. I don't want to buy a bike and then it's going to sit in the grass and you never ride it again. So he got up early in the morning. My dad owned a construction company, and he got
Right.
up early every morning, got up early in the morning and goes off to work. And I got up about the same time, and I told my mom I was going to the Massachusetts border, all the way down Route 7. And she just looked at me and said, okay, followed the Housatonic River all the way up to the border of Massachusetts. It was about 115, 120 miles. Went up
Wow.
and when my dad got back home from work, he was like, hey, my nickname was Chip. And he says, hey man, where's Chip? And my mom said, well, he went out early, went riding, and said he was going to the Massachusetts border. About 7, 8 o'clock that night, I come home. It's just starting to get dark because this was in the summer. And he said, where you been? I said, I went up and I told him some of the landmarks. And one of the places, there was a bike shop up in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, and that's where I was. And I told him about that bike shop and how the guy was really cool and rode all the way back. And so he didn't say anything. We had a little bit of dinner and I went straight to bed. I was whipped. Saturday morning, early, he gets into my room and he wakes me up. I'm like, damn, I got to go to work because that's what he wants.
Right.
Saturday morning was work day with my dad. And he said, come on, we're going to the city. We're going to get you a bike. And of course, we're Italian, Well, back up, we're Sicilian. My dad always told me to tell everybody you're Italian because, sometimes the
Seemed like the
Sicilians,
Sicilians back then.
yeah, they get a bad name, especially when you say I own a construction company, you
Right.
know. So so we go to the city and there's this beautiful Bianchi dealership and they sold other bikes too, but he said you're going to get an Italian bike. And that was my first Bianchi and it was unreal. And I got home and started Bike Express had been in business for a few years. Two brothers owned it. and I became real close with them. That's how I met Kevin.
And this
We
was your
raced.
local bike shop.
Yeah, well, Kevin
Okay.
was the mechanic out there,
No
and
kidding.
so we started racing for Bike Express. And it's a shame because if I could go into my bike room, I'd show you the jersey. Anyhow,
Send me a
both of
picture of
them.
it because I'm gonna overlay photos into this so that
Yeah,
the folks at home
absolutely, I will.
understand what we're talking about.
But yeah, so raced for them, and of course, time progressed, went through high school, I did various sports. I played football and hockey, and but biking was always my passion. And then joined the military in '83, right out of high school, and kind of cycling just stopped. Running became more of a passion because of the military and going to school. I rode a little bit in college. I bought another Bianchi in '87 from Kevin's store. Well, Kevin was the mechanic. That's how we became really, really tight. Uh, and that's kind of a funny story in itself because when I got back, I was going to Western Connecticut State University, and I went down, had my bike worked on, and bought another bike. So I had a couple of Bianchis at this time, and I remember Kevin telling the owner, he said, I don't like this guy. He's too much of a damn jarhead with that stupid military haircut, always bossing me around. And he said, "No, you don't understand. Ed's a great guy. You guys have a lot in common. Just give him some time." And then I'd go into the shop, and John would say, "Man, how's everything going?" That's the owner. And I said, "I don't like that dickhead Kevin. He's a dickhead." No, 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 you don't understand. He's a good guy. Well, lo and behold, we became best of friends. And there's more to the story, but
So
he's
for
a
those
great
at
guy.
home who don't know, Kevin was one your initial crew chief for your solo attempt
Yeah.
race across America, and then was our co-crew chief as a team lead and also a rider. Um, but I want to get through. You got a great resume here. You've accomplished a lot in life, and then I'm really curious. Again, two things I'm looking to do with this podcast. I want to encapsulate history. People like yourself, Greg. I call us you guys. You're the unassuming everyday heroes that not a lot of people may have never heard of. They don't know your background. Yet these are the people we should be emulating as a society. And if nobody encapsulates these stories, then at a certain point it just goes away because everybody today just wants to swipe for 5 seconds of content. Well, this is the meat and potatoes life. And so you already alluded to it. 83, you graduate, you go to the United States Army. Immediately, how quickly from that point, you go into the 82nd, go into Grenada. What was the gap between basic training, airborne school, and then going to Grenada?
Yeah, so we graduated in early May, and I mean, I was able to walk, and then 2 days later, I'm in basic training for 13 weeks. And
Okay, so I just talked to Greg about this. Here's what I think is interesting. Your basic training, his basic training, I assume pretty similar versus when my last job in the Army was leading basic training. Obviously, there's a difference. Society has shifted. They've changed from I don't know that I want to say like an attrition model where we're going to beat you down. Either, this is the standard, not we're going to work together to rise you up. We want to do everything we can to weed you out, which still is there to an extent. But as the world has changed, they realize if that's the only model we use, we're going to probably lose so many people. We can't support the Army mission. So you graduate 18 years old.
oh yeah.
What is basic training like for you? And do you happen to remember your basic training company?
Oh, absolutely. So, we were they called it Sand Hill, and I was in Bravo Company,
Okay.
and Bravo 11. I'll never forget it.
Okay.
And mine, Abdella, ABD. So I can tell you, when I first got there, we went to Repel Station, and that was okay, but for me it was a little bit more difficult. Um, because I didn't
What is Repel Station?
Repel stations where you go in, it's like it was less than it felt like it was a million years, but it was like 3 days, 4 days, and all they're doing is it's where you get your hair cut. It's where they show you some of the basic stuff, how to
Right.
march, how to get into formation, how to stand on a line, all that stuff. They give
It's
you
the
your
cattle corral before they shind you off to your.
absolutely,
Okay, so that
absolutely.
became 30th AG.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then as soon as you got yeah, and the drill sergeants, they were okay. They weren't hard on you. They were there to do a job to make sure you got your shot records and all that stuff and make sure
Right.
you get your pay straight. And so I get in there, but my name is Samuel Edward, okay? Not Edward. I go by Ed.
Ah, okay.
And so at that station, when they were asking what's your first name, I went Edward, and middle, I said Samuel. And and their drill sergeant's sitting right over top of me. And as they're typing it, I go, "Oh, wait a minute, I made a mistake. It's Samuel." And that drill sergeant blasted me. Are you that stupid? You don't know your first name? Are you that stupid? Get the hell out of here. Get him out of here. Put him on the damn bus back. You can walk. You can walk back to where you from? Where you from? And man, it was
Oh,
miserable. I said, Edward Samuel, Edward Samuel. Now I swear to you to this day, on my military records, it's Edward Samuel, but on everything
wow.
else, it's so I get my retirement benefits. My retirement pay comes every month. My disability check comes every month. Life is good, except for when I try to get online with the VA
Oh,
or DFAS. They
right.
want to see my passport and they want to see my license. And when they see
Because
it's
your names
Samuel
are
E.,
backwards.
it kicks me out and I can't do it. It's miserable. But anyways, with that, so from there you go to you get on a bus and it what seemed like forever. Half that crew went to Harmony Church. The
Right.
other half goes to San Hilton, they called it. And I was jumping for joy. I'm like, man, we're going to San Hilton. And you can see those where Harmony Church is. It's a toilet, you
Ooh,
know. We get up to,
not much has changed.
oh
I'll-
no, oh no. We get up to Sand Hill and the buildings are beautiful. I'm like, man, this is like a college campus. Life is going to be good. Man, when that drill
Famous
sergeant,
last words. Huh?
oh yeah, when Drill Sergeant Lamb, who happened to be my drill sergeant, when he got on that bus, he pretty much told us, he blasted. He said, "Let me tell you something. You have 10 seconds to get off my effing bus, and 9 seconds are gone. Get off my bus." And I mean, just blasted us. And we're running around like asses, and you got drill sergeants on the bottom. They're throwing people here. You go over here. And Sergeant Lamb, for whatever reason, because I was on the front of the bus, we apparently made eye contact, and
Oh,
he
you
didn't
were
like
dead,
that.
man.
And I'm going over to this other
You eye
platoon.
fucking me, private.
Oh yeah. Oh no, no. He came over to that platoon and he grabbed me by the shirt and he goes, "You eyeballed me. You're in mine. I'm gonna ride you out of the unit. I'm gonna ride you out of the army. You won't last one day with me, mother," and just blasted me. And I'm thinking, this guy's gonna kill me. So here I am. I'm now in his company, in his platoon, Bravo 11, and it was Sergeant Lamb who you say he would spit between his teeth. He'd go like
Yeah.
that the whole damn time. And then Sergeant White. Sergeant Lamb was a big, strong black guy, former Vietnam vet. And then you had Sergeant White, who was a white guy, who was also a Vietnam vet. And that's the thing. You had a lot of these Vietnam vets. You had a lot of younger guys too. Sergeant Tate, really good guy. He was a young drill sergeant. Just great guy, super smart. The first sergeant we had, kind of heavy set, but man, he could outpush everybody and just amazing. These guys were, they gave me everything I needed in the military to be successful in the military, no matter how hard they were. And Sergeant Lamb, towards the end, he had his favorites.
Of
Now, I was
course.
not one of them,
It's
but
human nature.
yeah, I think, you know. I think I was one of those guys that he kind of figured out I was going to make it. Like I had an airborne contract. Um, I did not have a Ranger contract. I had an airborne contract, and I was going to the 82nd. But anyhow, these guys were, to me, they were legendary. They didn't
What
put up with any
what
crap.
drives you to leave the comfort zone? So at this point, you're in Connecticut, correct?
What?
You're in Connecticut, correct?
When?
What you graduate high school,
Oh
Connecticut.
yeah.
What drives you to leave that? Raise your right hand and say, "I want to write a blank check and go into the army."
Man, Caleb, a captain, I wish I could tell you that it was this unbelievable drive to want to serve. My dad always had he had a saying that you're going to serve you're going to serve your country before you take advantage of it or exploit it. And I've heard that before. There were several other guys that I listened to that kind of had their fathers said the same thing, but I remember distinctly my dad telling me that, and my brother too. But like I said, I had played football and hockey, and I always thought I was a better hockey player. I mean, I could skate before I could walk, that sort of
Yep.
thing. But I was never fast enough, so they stuck me in the goal. Uh, and of course, I didn't want to be a goalie, but that's a totally different, story in itself, how I became a goalie. And I thought I was a decent goalie. We won a state championship, so I couldn't have been that bad. Uh, but football was kind of preparing
Life.
football for me was preparing me for hockey. We didn't have a very good team, but apparently I was decent enough to get a couple of looks at these little tiny Division III and Division II schools like Marist,
Okay.
um, and I wanted to go. They were going to offer me a small scholarship, and you're talking about Marist. Marist is like at the time $30,000 a year, and I remember my old man going all the way up there for that visit with the coach, and they had people taking us around, and we had lunch, and I'm like, Dad, what do you think? I remember him talking to the coach saying, "So, what kind of scholarship are we talking about?" And the coach told my dad, he goes, "Well, Mr. Abdella, it's not really a scholarship. It's more of a leadership scholarship." And dad looked at him and said, "You're crazy. My son doesn't have any leadership skills in his entire body. What are you talking about leadership scholarship?" And he goes, "Well, he
Wow.
says pens and pencils, right? Is that what you're talking about? Pens and pencils you're going to give my kid?" And,
Right.
and that's pretty much what it was. It was nothing. It was just to get people to play football there. And when we got in the truck, my dad could see right through it. He goes, "Look," he kept telling me, "You want to go to," he said, "I'll buy you a brand new car. You can live on campus. I want you to go to that teacher's college," which happened to be 30 minutes down the road.
Yep.
And I kept telling him, "No, Dad, I really want to go to Marist." Dean College was another one in Massachusetts, and my dad refused that one too. And unfortunately, we had I remember them giving the ASVAB test in high school, and everybody had to take it. That was the thing. Every guy had to take the ASVAB test. It wasn't like today where, you don't have to. Every male took it. And I remember
It
taking
was
it.
basically a part of signing the draft criteria almost.
Yeah, I didn't mind it. I mean, it was a real simple test. I just got done with the SAT, so that burned my brains out. But this one, I got a 71, and I'm just like, I didn't think anything else. 71 is like a C, but not in the military. A 71 is you're a grade A. So
Right.
yeah, I'm getting all these phone calls from these different branches, and I remember my father just telling me, he says, "You're not going to that glorified high school, so get that out of your mind. I'll buy you a brand new car. You can live on campus at Western Connecticut, state college at the time. Now it's the state university." And I just butted heads with him. Typical father and son,
Of course.
especially, the first son. And I remember it was March, and we were tightening things up. People had already early admission to universities. My girlfriend since seventh grade,
The one that got away.
oh, got away. Seventh grade, she's going to Fordham. Life couldn't be any more ideal. And I remember just saying, I don't know what's going to happen in the future, and she kept saying, "Why don't you come to Fordham? Why don't you come to Fordham?" I don't know. Marist is it. I want to go to Marist. I want to play football. Scoog's
Yeah.
up there. And long story short, that March, the Army called. And I remember actually I was with the Air Force at first, kind of looking at what I could do. And it just didn't seem like there was anything, you know, I mean, I didn't really I didn't like their uniforms, you know. I was like, nah. And then the Army
Well, in
called.
the Air Force at that point was pretty new.
Yeah, 1950, 1948 they started. So,
Right.
you know, so the Army is in the same building, so is the Marine Corps and the Navy, but Army was the one that, I remember this is another embarrassing thing. Talk about stupidity. It was the beret.
Oh,
It
how
was the
cool.
beret. And I
Send me
remember
send me that picture, please.
I will.
I wanna upload it.
I remember sitting there and I'm in this office with this guy, and he's telling me there's nothing in the military you can't do. You could do this, you could do that, man. And I kept looking at the Green Beret because, I mean, you're talking about John Wayne and Rambo in the 80s I want to, and he looked at me and he told me the truth. He said, look, you got really good grades. He said, your ASVAB's really tight. High school grades could be a little bit better. He said, but I'm going to be honest with you. You got to spend, years in the military before you get the Q course. He said it's a very difficult course. And, we accept a lot of college kids that have graduated school that, you got to go to language school. And I said, okay, okay. So I stay in the military a few years and then and I was just like really bummed out. I'm like, they're thinking about maybe going to Germany or you can go to Hawaii. So he's trying to get me in by, showing me wonderful
Sweeten
places.
the deal.
Yeah. And I looked over and I swear to you, as I'm sitting in this damn chair, this is how ridiculously dumb I was. I looked at that maroon beret. I said, okay, I can't get a green. I said, what about this one? He goes, that's airborne. That's airborne. I can get you an airborne contract right now. And bam, we signed it. And he said, man, you're gonna love it. You jump out of planes. And all I'm thinking of is that damn beret. See, I want everything in my life. I've always wanted to be different.
Okay.
When you sit there and talk about, hey, I'm going to do this great world championship race and I want to do a podcast and everybody says, what are you going to talk about? And I'm just like, everything, why do I ride endurance ride? Back in the day, I never did endurance stuff, but I always wanted to do something that was more,
Okay.
and like with the military, I just didn't want to go in there and wear your basic boonie hat. I had to do something that would, and I'm not narcissistic. I just wanted to do something that would distinguish me, would I would be a
I
little bit
understand.
different. And I remember thinking, I got to go home and tell my dad I just signed, you know, this contract
And how did
because
that go?
no, not good. Not good at all. Look, he didn't have a problem with the military. He loved the military. He loved the soldiers. I remember we had a neighbor when I was real young, that lived across the street that had gotten drafted.
Okay.
And I think it was one of those go to war or go to jail type.
This the
So
end
this
of
is that.
Vietnam.
Yeah, this is probably 1970, 1971.
Okay.
Because I was old enough to remember the things that were going on. His name was Richard. And I remember he goes off. We had this my father put on this huge celebration for him before he shipped out. And, had a big barbecue and invited the entire neighborhood. And Richard was going off to war, and my father wanted to make sure that he sent him off. And I think my father was really first time I've ever seen him where he was just so melancholy about something like that. And I couldn't understand what it was. And
Let me ask you this from what you've said so far and what I know about you. I imagine your dad probably didn't celebrate a whole lot of things. Is that accurate?
yeah, celebrate anything? No, not really. My dad was one of those guys that um
I mean, if
in
you're waking up at 12 to go to work on a Saturday, something tells me you're not celebrating a whole lot there.
no. No, my dad was one of those guys. He just, very few words. If you wanted to ever talk with my old man, I said this at his at his funeral, during his eulogy, uh, I told, I said the part where if you ever wanted to have a conversation with Dad, you had to go out and pick up a rake or pick up a shovel. I mean, that's the way it was. He would come home from all day, and that was the thing. Here he is. He owns his own company, and he's out there working with the guys. During the early 80s, I remember my mom telling us that Christmas is going to be short because my dad was giving all the money to his, he was keeping his employees employed. He
Mm,
was making them tar roofs that have already been tarred like just 6 months earlier, just to keep them in a job,
okay.
because they weren't going to take a handout. These are big, strong, burly construction guys. They weren't going to take a handout. They wanted to work for their pay, and so my dad would just take money out of our coffers and pay him. But that's the type of person he was, but always real quiet, unless you had something that was so deep rooted.
Right.
When I came back from Iraq the second in 2003. I remember, or I'm sorry, 2004. I was there 2003, 2004, but
Right.
2004 we come back and I go all the way up to Connecticut. We drove and stopped along the way, met some people. I actually saw Kevin and Jill, and then went into Connecticut and spent about 2 weeks with my folks. And my dad was big into walking, and he'd walk like 6 hours. He lived in Washington Depot, which is the most beautiful place in Connecticut.
Okay.
Beautiful farmlands, big, beautiful horse ranches. My dad owned Belgium, um, what were they called? The big horses, Belgian blondes. He owned two of them,
Okay.
and he was big into that. He wouldn't pull them. He wouldn't work them. He didn't like that. The only time he'd ever work them, he'd bring them out to uh, he had a lot of land up there in Connecticut, and he'd, cut a couple trees down and he'd have them pull the trees out, but that would be it. He'd never bring them to those horse shows, even though he would go to every single one of the horse pulls. He'd go to all of them. But he would never pull his horses. But I remember we would sit there and we would go on, he said, come on, let's go for a walk. And we'd be walking for 3, 4 hours, 5 hours. And I remember saying, please, not to him, but hoping that he never asked me those difficult questions, ones where you'd have to, reveal things that went on over there. I didn't want to hurt his heart. I have nothing against any man that goes off to combat. I have nothing against any man that deals with his demons, however he does. I've never had a problem with a person that deals with them anyway. I read Chris Kyle's book because it became such a sensation. And I remember kids and, because I teach school, I remember a lot of the students asking me, were you a sniper? Were you this? I'm like, no, what are you talking about? And that movie, American Sniper, had come out. So, anytime a book would come out, I'd always kind of pick it up at the bookstore and I'd look through and I'd look at the pictures to see if I knew anybody, because every once in a while you'd say, hey, man, I knew this guy. But here's this guy, Chris Kyle, and God rest his soul, he was a beast. But the only thing, and I tell people this every once in a while, the only thing that really kind of bothered me about it is that he, it wasn't that he didn't, I'm sure he had issues, but to write about it and to let the world know, I could never understand that. And to let your father know that you sat behind a scope and for all practical purposes, there are 163 guys that are not waking up. And that's the low end. There's
Right.
probably more, that weren't accounted for. And that was it. That's my dad. He was,
Mm,
when I came home and told him I had joined the military, back to that story you asked, he just was quiet. Um, my mom took me to the recruiter station so I could be shipped out. My dad said his good nights. I remember we went to our favorite restaurant. which was like we'd go maybe once or yeah, once a month, once every 2 months. That was kind of the big thing for us. And anyways, that was my going away. Not a big celebration like with Richard. The thing that bothered me about Richard is he goes off to basic training, and I don't know how this happened, but he got kicked out. He was dishonorably discharged from basic training. He got kicked out. Was, not, not for the military. And I remember him coming home and sitting down with my father, and just telling him, I remember the only thing I remember what he would say is he said, yeah, breakfast would be SOS, shit on a shingle. To this day, I remember those words and chip beef. And it's something that when they were showing, when we'd go through the food line for the chow hall, when they said, "Do you want some chipped beef?" and somebody said, "Hey, that's SOS," I immediately said, "No, I don't want any of that." And you understand, to this day, 26 years in the military, never once have I ever had chipped beef. It was because of that
Oh,
story. I swear to you, I wouldn't touch it because Richard talked to, about it. It was the one thing I remembered, but you know. It's yeah, I fought him the whole way, and the whole time he kept saying, "Go to that teacher's college, go to that," because that's what Western Connecticut was. University. It was a teacher's college, it's a liberal arts school. And he kept pestering me, and so I joined the military, and I get out in I joined in 83 and I got out in 87. I went to Clemson. Um, and writing down because of scholarships and certain monies. If you don't make enough money and stuff, you have to put your parents name down and all that stuff. So my father was happy I was going to college. Didn't want me to go to Clemson, didn't understand why I had to go all the way down there, but I did have a girlfriend. you know But I got the phone call just before spring break. I just gotten my big army check, and I bought all the things that we needed to hydrate for spring break. By the cases.
the alcoholic
And,
beverages.
oh man, just light stuff. And I get a call, and it's my old man, and he said, "Listen," he said, "I understand they got rid of your major at Clemson." I'm like, "What are you talking about, Dad? I'm an engineering student." He goes, no, son." He said, "They got rid of your major." I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Wine, women, and song are no longer an option at Clemson. You have,"
Ah,
he said, "it takes 22 hours to drive home. I'm going to give you 24 because I know you might have to pack up some stuff. See you in 24 hours," and click. Hung up the phone. I'm like, "Wait a minute, what the hell?" I called back thinking maybe the phone went dead. My mom picks up. He goes, Chip, Chip, you got to get home." I said, "Are you guys serious? I'm really," she says, 24 hours. I'll see you in 24 hours. Like, holy shit, you know? And I was in the reserves. I was a drill sergeant, a drill sergeant. I'd already gotten done with school. So a drill sergeant in the reserve unit. And I went up, and just by the grace of God, the full timer was there. And I'm telling him, I'm like, "Dude, I got to go home." He goes, "What do you mean? How long are you going to be gone for?" I said, "No, I'm going home forever." He goes, "What are you talking about?" And I told him the story. And he says, "Okay, okay, let's settle down. Where are you going in Connecticut?" He says, I just went to school with a girl that's from Connecticut. Um, Let me give her a call. She was in the drill sergeant unit." Sure as shit, man. There I am in Waterbury, Connecticut, the very
ah,
next weekend for
ah,
drill.
ah.
But let me get back to, I told you about this, I won't mention her name in case this gets, big. Annie Crawford. Um, seventh grade
Oh,
at March.
Annie,
I thought
come
maybe
on, Annie.
I thought my father was giving me shit. When I got home, and I told my dad I joined the military, the house was pretty silent. Mom did a lot of crying. My brother just said, "You're going to get killed over there." And my sister was too young to really, I guess she understood, but
Now,
um,
when you joined, we weren't actively at war, correct?
no, 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 nothing. No, we were
But
Vietnam had happened, long gone.
but but Vietnam had really tainted the
Absolutely it
view
did.
of everybody.
Oh, it did. Listen, when I went back to school and they started, I told first person I told after my dad, I called Annie that evening and I said I made my decision. She says, "Okay, so you're going to go to Fordham?" I said, "No, Annie, I'm going to the Army. I'm going to be an airborne paratrooper." And she just was like, horrified. She goes, "You got to be kidding me. Are you serious? With all the stuff that we've learned, are you kidding me?" And I said,
Wow.
Learn what? What are you talking about?" In history class, when they mentioned, it was such a sore subject. And, people that join the military, I'm sorry, in a small decade from the 70s until the 80s, the military was kind of tainted.
Oh
And
yeah.
in Connecticut especially was kind of tainted. And yeah, I remember going to school and we kind of muddled through a couple of days and she finally just said, "I think we're going our separate ways." She broke up with me. You believe that she broke up with me? I'm like,
Oh
"You got to
no.
be kidding me." I mean, since seventh grade.
And
And the
and
thing
this was
is, she
what?
came after
This was
me.
senior year?
Yeah, I was brand new. I was brand new at Scattercoke Middle School. I was brand spanking new, brand new kid on the block. And I remembered the joke she told me. Her joke. Why why are the Scattercoke Indians, because that was our we were the Scattercoke Indians in middle school. Why are they all red? I'm like, I don't know. You'd be red too if you had 7 periods a day. That was her big joke. I'm telling you.
Oh,
I'm
how things
61
have
years old.
changed.
I can remember that from sixth grade. That's how traumatized I was.
Oh my
It was
gosh.
horrible, but needless to say, graduate, go off to the military, basic training was an eye-opening experience. I had never had anything like that. Football, hockey training couldn't hold a candle to what went on in basic training, but the stuff I learned about myself, about things like there was no way on God's green earth I was going to leave. We had two guys, I'll never forget them. Weber was one of them. And I don't even know if I should be saying these names. The other guy was actually African. I think he was from South Africa. They were both PhD recipients. Okay, they were getting their PhDs. And when I say they're getting their PhDs, man, they were look, you know, I
So
worked
why
in
were
my
they enlisting in the infantry?
well, they enlisted because it was a way for them to pay for school. Don't
Ah,
ask me about this, why they joined the infantry, of all things, why the infantry? I have no clue.
well,
Unless it
they
was
probably
more,
got the recruiter okey doke just like you.
maybe, I don't know. Maybe there's more money involved, I thought. But neither one of them made it. Both
Okay.
of them were just,
Too
I
smart.
mean, they didn't have an athletic bone in both their bodies put together. We would do push-ups.
I know the type.
Oh yeah, Sergeant Tate would get up on the platform because he was you could tell, when I became a drill sergeant, I learned all this through going through Drill Sergeant Academy, exactly the way things are run. And but
It's
that's
a
another
science.
story. Oh yeah, that's another story. I know, but Drill Sergeant Tate was our PT guru, tall, thin, run you to death. Push when he pushed up. See that's another thing. When you get on those on the podiums,
Mhm.
people don't realize that if you drape your hands over the end, it looks like you're going all the way down to your chest, but actually you're doing really the chicken neck. You're only going down a small way. But to the troopers on the bottom, to
Right.
the basic trainees when they're looking up and they're doing the push-ups, it gives the
The illusion.
appearance that yeah, that you're going all the way down. I know that now going through the academy. I didn't know it then, but he would sit there and he'd do one, two, three, one, and we'd all come back with one. And you could hear him like not even three push-ups in, he'd go, "Look at Weber, can't do a push-up. Look at Weber," And it was those were things that I'll never forget because as a drill, I use those things as well. But drill sergeant land, drill sergeant right, white, they were like father figures to me. I don't think they realize what they've instilled in us. Just the preparation. So basic training gets done, you don't go anywhere. I mean, you go through. Once you finish basic training, you go right into your AIT, which is right there,
Right.
same bed, never even have to leave your bedroom. You're there.
Right. So you did the one station unit
Oh,
training, just like the
absolutely,
rest
I
of us.
did. It
Okay.
was bad, but I always tell this story because it's one of the limited stories that I tell. Um, Having a name like Abdella, ABD, you're first on the list.
Hmm.
And so we get down, they're yelling and screaming at us. It's nighttime. We finally get into our racks. Uh, we had a very small bull session, I guess you'd say, with Drill Sergeant Lamb. He got us in a circle, told us what was going on, showed us his office, and he had to say this, my door is always open, but we never went.
Of course.
Never went. And then we got to our racks. Mine was on the bottom. Atkins, this guy from South Carolina, great guy. He was on top, and we became best of friends. And it was funny because my bed was right next to the painted picture of the double A, 80 Deuce.
Mhm.
And so I was just like, okay, it was meant to be. The very next morning, early, I'm talking like 4 in the morning, I got a tap on the shoulder by the fire guard saying, you got to get up, you got to get dressed, you got to go downstairs. And I'm running downstairs dressed, and I'm like, what the fuck's going on? There's a couple other guys. We're all on fucking KP. KP, Kitchen Patrol. Now you got to
Oh.
understand, it's raining out. It's miserable. I'm in freaking, you know, Georgia, and there's nothing but pine trees and sand, and it's
Hmm.
raining out, and it's dark, and I'm getting yelled at. And here I am doing KP, scrubbing pots and pans, serving breakfast.
Welcome to the
And,
Army.
oh, it was awful. And it was because ABD, I'm the first one out. And I remember sitting there, they said you can go out to the back, smoke them if you got them. Well, I don't smoke, but I went out anyways. And we're sitting around, I'm thinking, thank God this shit's over with. And this little E3 comes out and he goes, it ain't over yet. And he's yelling and screaming at me. He's a freaking E3. And I'm like, the hell, man, I'll beat the brakes off you. But he had more rank than me. He was out of basic training and AIT, a freaking cook. He says, it ain't done. You got all day. We have two more meals. Let's go. And shit, I was on KP all day. After lunch, hand to God. After lunch, this is when they had payphones, and I mean stacks of payphones.
Oh yeah.
And I'm looking at those payphones and I'm missing home.
And what
I'm
that
missing
cost?
my
A
mama.
nickel?
Huh?
What that cost? A nickel?
I don't even know. I had a calling card,
Okay.
and I went over and I want to call my mom. And I remember, did I call the operator? And it wasn't no, it had to have been a calling card because my mom gave me a stack of them. Long story short, I called her. First off, I wasn't even in my building, sir, because the mess hall it was a common area.
Right.
It was in the middle of four buildings. So you're kind of the hub, and all four of those companies come to you so I'm in a whole different company. I'm not in Bravo Company. I'm somewhere else. I don't even know what company it was. And I mean this drill sergeant who I'd never seen before in my life.
Oh, he ate you for lunch.
Oh, Jesus. I mean, I'm talking to my mom. I've been on the phone not even 5 seconds. And I'm crying. She's crying. And I love you, mama. And I love you. And all of a sudden, this guy starts yelling from like a mile away. What are you doing on my fucking phone? And all of a sudden, I look up and he looks at me. He sees tears streaming down my face. And he knows it's not because he's yelling at me. Who you talking to? And I said, my mama. He says, you go ahead and talk. You got 2 minutes. Say goodbye and you love her and tell her we're doing everything. We're treating you right here. Never knew this guy. Never saw this guy again in my life. I hang up the phone. He brings me to his office. I'm thinking he's going to kill me. God's honest truth. That man took off his Smokey the Bear hat, put it on his desk, sat me down, sat on his desk, knock-kneed with me, and told me a story. He said, when I first joined the military, like 15 years ago, I missed home too. And he said, but listen, you can't go out there and use those phones. Not until it's your time. There's a reason for everything. You understand? Yes, Drill Sergeant. You sure you understand? I said, yes, I do. He gets up, puts his hat on, and I mean, I pushed that floor for the next 20 minutes while he yelled at me. And every time my arms got tired, he said, flip around and do push.
Flutter kicks.
And when I couldn't do sit-ups anymore, he said, do the dying cockroach. Well, I was new. I didn't even know what the dying cockroach was. But he showed me as he participated in picking up my legs and showing me what the dying cockroach was. And never used the phone again, but I'll never forget that guy. Never saw him again as long as I lived. Never saw him again after that. And he never told anybody. I never told Sergeant Lamb or Sergeant White, which was surprising to me because they share shit like that. Hey, man, I just got this dumbass on the phone.
Oh
Um,
yeah, it doesn't take long for the drill sergeant network to
oh,
the
hell
word
yeah.
travels fast.
Yeah. Basic training was it was eye-opening. It was tough, but it was something I needed to give me the discipline that I had to have. I had to have, you know, my dad was a great disciplinarian. My mom, she was more into the Dr. Spock books and shit like that. Don't raise your hand to your child, all that bull crap. Talk to them like they're adults. Uh, but we never had any wants or needs ever. And I think that especially with these kids, especially with my son, it becomes kind of an issue because we didn't have a good work ethic. I worked. I worked for my old man. I did stuff in the summer for him. I remember going out there and painting the damn factory, the building for him and, one summer and shit like that. But, and I guess that kind of gave me some work ethic, but the discipline part, that came in the military. Um,
Now,
AIT.
do you remember approximately how many people you graduated basic training with?
Oh boy. That I would be lying if I said each platoon. Look, I'm telling you right now, we had people that fell out, both Weber, and I wish I remembered. The only reason why I remember Weber is because of 1, 2, look at Weber. That's it. And I know what he looked like, and I know what that other guy looked like too. The guy from Africa. But they got washed out pretty early. We had another guy that we called him the old man. He got washed out. I remember him because he was in our company, or our platoon, sorry. Um, we had this guy that was built like a rock. I mean, just he was an English school teacher, high school English teacher, and he got in trouble. Apparently there was an incident with one of the students, female, and so now he's in the military. He's going to lose his career over this. Uh, but for whatever reason, just before the end of it, he called his girlfriend. They said, the case is over. They dropped it. You can come back home. You can be a teacher again. You got your license, that sort of shit. He failed, purposely failed the PT test. It was him and another guy who was in another platoon, but this guy was in my platoon. And I remember I'll never forget the disgust I had because he was Mr. Everything. And not Tate, Lamb, well, Tate too, even though Tate was part of another platoon, drill sergeant. They loved him, man. They used to sit there and, massage his egos. He was going to be Mr. Everything. There was another guy in my platoon, and I can see him like clear as day, blonde hair, big, strong guy, could do a million push-ups, max the PT test, all the time from the very first day, marched and humped like no tomorrow. He was going to airborne school. He failed airborne school. And I'll never
How do you
forget.
fail airborne school?
I don't know. I don't know if he failed because, you go through ground week where you do your PLFs, and I remember at the end you have to do five perfect PLFs, which that's not that's a given. And then you have Tower Week, and I don't know if he just I do remember this though. Tate would come over and always sit there and put his arm around this guy, and I wish I remembered his name because it would always bother me. It was always like I was not the best soldier because I didn't know any of this stuff. And Craig says, uh, smart ranger, strong ranger.
Oh yeah.
You be the strong ranger. And it always used to, and I'm like, what are you talking about? He says, because he was an RI. And he says, no, we had guys like you that just, you know, they weren't good with the books, but boy, they were strong. When it came, we could rely on them. And because
Machine guns and extra weight. Oh
well,
yeah.
I'd always second guess myself. I'd always, like in basic training, I'd always have to do things twice. It was like, BRM was the only thing I went through pretty quick with BRM, but the diamond washer, I would
Yep.
have to go out there and do, because I didn't understand the concept of why we were doing it.
Right.
You know, um, at that time we had the little boxes that you would go and do that sort of stuff. They brought out a big trailer for the guys that failed. And I always said, man, I wish I was in it because it was kind of cool. It was like a computer game for the guys that failed. You didn't want to be in that trailer with them because you could hear the walls coming out because drill sergeants were yelling and screaming at them. Uh,
Right.
but yeah, I had to do things sometimes two and three times, you know. Um, but this guy, this blonde-headed kid, man, they thought he was, the cat's meow. And I remember Tate left drill sergeant. He was with the 82nd just before I shoved off to Benning.
Uh,
And I remember seeing him and I'm like, holy cow. I said, what are you doing? He goes, how are you doing? And I said, man, I'm doing fine. I said, I got my wings, your boy didn't. And he kind of just pushed it off. I wanted him to know, shit, I didn't think I'd ever bump into this guy again. But
right.
because I never saw the other ones. I know Tate was the only one that I saw again. And we had just come back from Grenada, and I told him, I said, I'm getting ready to go off back to Benning. I'm going to ranger school. He said, well, good luck with that. I hope you do well. Um, but and that was interesting too. When you go back to Benning, you go through RIP, Ranger Indoctrination Program. Now they got something different, RASP or something
Rasp.
like that.
Yep.
Um, and that was tough. Before in Bragg, First Sergeant Donaldson, who was like a father figure to me. Are we? Am I going way off?
You're totally
This
fine.
is
Go
good.
ahead.
Okay. Because I got to give, when we talk about people that meant the most to us in the military, um, of all the people I served with, this probably is the guy that meant the most. I mean, Drill Sergeant Lamb, Drill Sergeant White, Drill Sergeant Tate, even though Tate wasn't part of my, company, or I mean platoon, I love that guy. I loved him because he was hard on me. I loved him because he would ridicule me. Uh, hey, fat boy, because I was a big guy when I went into the basic. I couldn't do you had to do 5 pull-ups to get chow,
Uh,
and I couldn't do one. I mean, it was rough. I'd get maybe one or two. And you big fat football player, get to the back of the line. And by the time I got into the DFAC, you know, I mean,
2 minutes to
everybody,
eat.
shit, everybody was leaving, and I'm just now sitting down, and he'd always watch over me, him and Drill Sergeant Lamb. You know, you can have milk and water. You can't have that Coke. Now, and actually, when I first became a drill sergeant, you can't go near the DFAC. Drill sergeants have a little roped off area
Right.
that you can eat, and you better not say a damn word because that E7 in charge of that mess hall, that or yeah, he's an
They'll light you
E7.
up.
He will. I mean, he'll embarrass the shit out. And I remember that guy coming over when I was at Fort Jackson. Benny. Yeah, I was at Fort Jackson doing
Mhm.
as a school teacher. I know I'm getting way ahead of myself. I'm sorry. As a school teacher, I would have the whole summer off. So I'd do ADSW tour as a reservist where I could go off for 10 weeks, and do a full do a full
Right.
basic training. Sometimes I get real lucky and do a full basic training. I could only really only go for about 7, 8 weeks. So I do an ADSW tour. And I remember going to Fort Jackson, and it's when it first came out that you can't say anything. And I noticed that the area was roped off. And, I wanted to get up and I was about to say something. And that guy come running over and he said, "You need to sit down and eat your food there, Joe Sarn." And I'm like, he said, "No, don't talk to my people now." He said, "Let me tell you something." He says, I don't know if you know what's going on, but if you bother these kids while they're eating, I'll have your drill sergeant. I'll have your campaign hat." And he
Wow.
meant it. They would strip you of your campaign hat and send you home. For me, they would just send me home. For the guys on tour, they would take their campaign hat for that cycle, and they'd have to do some bullshit work, something really crummy, But yeah, so I went First Sergeant Donaldson was like probably one of the greatest men, I'd ever known. He was a Canadian soldier, had
Right.
close to 2,000 airborne jumps, and joined
Wow.
I swear to you, he joined, he joined the United States Army. He married a woman here and became part of the United States Army. One of those Vietnam vets, tough as freaking woodpecker lips. We had another first sergeant that was down the road. They called him Fred Flintstone. I swear to you, he looked like Fred Flintstone. Spit image. And I don't know what it is about those two, but they yelled and screamed at each other during the day, and we would always have to do competition together. And Art Donaldson, he had this high-pitched voice. He loved me. I was out cutting his grass, which was about the size of my desk here. It took two,
Two
two,
pushes.
yeah, that's it. And it was done. And I could hear him screaming, scream. And I'd run in there and he looked at me, he goes, "What are you sweating for?" And I told him, I said, "First Sergeant, you make me sweat every time you call me." And we hit it off. A lot of people didn't like him. This is got to understand now, this is in the early 80s. And a lot of folks, they didn't deal with a lot of that. So we had a lot of dopers that came in the late 70s, early 80s. We were known as the jumping junkies. And there
This is
was a
the 80
reason for it.
sector, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I had a lot of friends where I was that when we got back from Grenada, that was the one thing they did. They started cleaning house. They changed everything. They had piss tests coming out that now had meat on it. If you were an E4 or below, and you got caught one time, I believe I'm right when I said this. When I say this, I think they would give you they were going to give you an Article 15, no doubt about it. You're going to Charlie's Chicken Farm, CCF. Okay. You were fucked. But you would get a second chance. You'd have no rank, but you'd get a second chance. It wouldn't destroy your career. But don't get caught again. And
Okay.
I can tell you, there was several. So, in fact, I was just telling one of my VFW buddies about one of the guys that got kicked out because he had to go to Pennsylvania. And he says, "Well, I guess I'll be working in the coal mines now." And that was something he was trying to get away from. A Texas kid, Wolfel. I liked him a lot. He was a cool kid.
And what were they getting caught up in?
Marijuana.
Okay.
That was it. Smoking it. And man, they didn't put up with that. So but when twice a month, First Sergeant Donaldson would have to go and get his hair cut, which I don't know why. He didn't have anything. But he needed a driver. And I'd always get, my E7 would come up and say, "Hey, look, you're the driver for top tomorrow." And I'm like, "Why me?" He says, "Because you're a ass kisser and he likes you." And that would piss a lot of these like Sergeant Abellas and Sergeant Smith. It pissed these guys off because this guy liked me, not because I was a brown noser, just because I was respectful. I was respectful to his rank. I didn't make fun of him the way he talked. he didn't have any kids. He had birds, and he, told me that one time. So I remember twice a month we drive around early in the morning, and he would do his drive around, and he'd bump into all these first sergeants, and they would talk a little bit, but his the one he yelled at the most, they were best of friends.
Of
I was
course.
always like, I don't understand this. You guys hate each other. I didn't tell him that. It was but just to hear these guys talk war stories, it was just enlightening. And then he would take me out to get a haircut. And of course, I'd have to get my haircut. I'd have to pay the $3. You get a haircut.
Is that the PX?
Oh, absolutely, man. And I'd go in and we'd sit down and I'd get my haircut, paid my $3, and he'd get his haircut. I don't know what the hell he was cutting. There was nothing on top. But and we'd get back in the Jeep and he goes, let's go get a bite. And there was always this little tiny hot dog stand. You get one hot dog and no Coke. You can have water. Bring your canteen. And he'd buy me a hot dog. No chips. He'd eat two dogs, a bag of chips, two sodas. I was only allowed to bring my goddamn canteen and I'd get one hot dog. You gotta lose
Oh,
weight. You're gonna go to Ranger School. You gotta lose weight. I was just like, whatever.
so how does this
Yeah.
transition? 82nd, you become the driver, you got some clout. Are you an E5 at the time?
No, no, no. Man, I was just an E3. I was
Okay.
so young. I mean,
Mosquito
I had
wings,
a,
private first class.
yeah,
Okay.
private first class, E3.
How do
He,
you get selected post Grenada? Which, if you want to talk, I know that was kind of a quick blip.
yeah,
You go there. What does that look like? And then you come back. Why do you get selected to go to Ranger School?
there were two slots, and they're Department of the Army slots that could be given to any E5 and above, E4 and above.
Okay.
Nobody wanted it. Nobody wanted him. I wanted him. Oh, how I wanted him. I kept raising my hand. He told me, put your hand down, put your hand down, put your hand down. And finally, he blew a gasket. He always blew a gasket. Said he was going to make me an E4. And actually, I went to Benning with E4 on my freaking lapel because he claimed he made me an E4. Look, this guy he saved my freaking career. Um,
This was your first sergeant.
yeah, I went to armor school, which was like, I want to say it was like 3 weeks. It was right there at Benning. I mean, Bragg. It was 3 weeks, and he gives me a second MOS for it. Okay,
Okay.
I don't 92 Yankee, and I'm like, I don't want to be a supply guy. Shut up, chap. You need a second MOS. I didn't know what it meant. You know what it meant? When
Skill identifier.
Jesus, what it meant for me, I never had a problem with rank. And they'd always have to give me rank because I never had enough time in service or time in grade. And because of that damn designator, it's the reason I became a damn first sergeant.
No shit.
It is the reason, it is because of that, because where the hell am I going to be a goddamn first sergeant? There are no damn infantry units in the reserve unit. They're all combat support.
Right.
That 92 Yankee identifier made me a first sergeant because of him. I mean, I saw him one time after I left division.
Okay.
One time I was a drill sergeant at what was it, Fort Devens? Oh shit. I can't remember if it was Fort Dix, New Jersey. They
Okay.
still were pushing troops up there. And because we were in Connecticut, we would do drills up there. And I went up there between I was at college at this time. And I was, yeah. And I did a 6 week tour up there. And he was the goddamn battalion's command sergeant major. They have the wall of the hierarchy,
Oh yeah.
and I'm going through and here's the command sergeant or the first sergeant, company, all this, and then the command sergeant major, and there's freaking Donaldson. And I mean, I go running. I said, Where's his office? Where's his office?" And they said, "It's the White House way up there." And I go running. I mean, beelining. And I run in and there's an E5 female and she says, "Can I help you, Drill Sergeant?" I said, "I need to see Sergeant Major Donaldson. He's in a meeting right now." "No, he needs to see me." And I push that damn door open. And I mean, there's all these freaking first sergeant around his desk. "What are you?" And he looks up at me and he realizes exactly who I was. He goes, "Abdella." And I just said, I could not believe it. And then I said, "Man, I'm so sorry to bust in on your meeting." He said, "No, you guys get the hell out of here." And he sat me down. We had this long, almost hour talk. And just true to form, as soon as that hour talk was over and we chatted about everything from school to this to that, he finally looks at me and said, "Call my wife and get to work." And don't
That's
fuck
awesome.
up. God, I
That's
love
awesome.
that guy. But yeah, that's how that worked out. And
So you
but
volunteered,
yeah,
go to Ranger School. Did
yeah,
you have a regiment path right after that?
yeah. So, I wanted to get out of the military. I wanted to go to college. I had a girlfriend in South Carolina that was going to Clemson, and everything kind of worked out the way it was supposed to.
It always does, right?
Yeah, I couldn't survive on a little part-time job going to school, so the reserves was perfect for me. And I'd always say, as soon as I graduate, I'll leave the reserves. And it just it everything, so, so I get out, I do the thing in Clemson, the Major Wine Women in Song didn't work out. I I'm back home in like 20 hours.
And
And
at this point, Western Connecticut, right?
oh,
Is that where you
absolutely.
transitioned?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm up there, at my parents' house, and it's get well because it was spring break. It's almost summertime. I'm looking for a job, and I have this old friend of mine, who says, "My husband's father runs the cable company. Why don't you work there?" And I started working. He loved me. He military. He thought that was great. And I didn't tell him. I told him I was going to school. He just assumed it was night school. So as
Okay.
I'm working for him all through that summer, because of what I learned in the military, because of the desire to always want to do more than the other guys around you, you know, I, made a great impression. His name was Bob Saraday. He had five sons, and I was good friends with his three sons that worked for the cable company. And their wives also worked for the cable company, except for Mike. He was divorced, but he was a wild child. God, he was wild. And they had this big beach lake house in Ithaca, New York, and they'd
Okay.
always talk about it. So weekends, he'd say, "Hey, let's go to Ithaca." And it was always the same thing. We'd go up to Ithaca, we'd hang out, and I'm young. I'm like 20. We're drinking, we go to the bar, and of course, if Mike goes to a bar, he's not going to leave without getting into a fight. And
This
his
is the guy who's
friends,
divorced.
yeah, well, his friends would scatter and they would run, and we became best of friends because I stayed. And at when the fight was over, I'm beating the shit out of Mike saying, "Why'd you do that? That was so stupid. We didn't have to do that. Now we got to be all bloodied and my lips broken and I got a black eye because you're an asshole." But it was one of those, "Man, you stood your ground with me. Why'd you?" And the brothers are like, "Man, why'd you do that?" I'm like, "Man, I'm not gonna let him out there on his own. Shit, man, come on." But the old man found out about it and was just impressed. So when I say God works in mysterious ways, when the summer was coming to an end, I had to explain to Mr. Sarity that I'm leaving. I'm got to go to college. And he just, I mean, he was ripped. And Monica, his daughter-in-law, who's married to Bobby Jr., she's in there with me. And I said, "Can I have a part-time job?" He says, "We don't have part-time jobs in the utilities. This is not a joke. What kind of part-time? What are you talking about?" He was a rough guy too. And I said, "Look, I'll work every Tuesday, every Thursday, every Saturday," because we had shifts on Saturday.
Yeah.
And Monica kind of chimed in and said, you know, Dad, we really could do this. We could use his help. He's really good. And so he looks at me and he says, you know what? You come every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. You missed one day. If you're not dead or in the hospital, you're fired.
But that doesn't
You're
sound
not.
like the Army.
Oh, yeah. He says, you're not going to get any benefits. I said, no, no, I don't want any benefits. I just want to work. No benefits. I said, no, 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 no health care. I said, no, I'm good. I'm good. He said, okay, okay. Yeah, yeah, we might be able to do this. I said, there's just, I have one weekend drill. He said, no, I like the military. I like the military. You can have that one Saturday, but it better be drill. And if you don't have drill, you better be here. I said, I promise to God, I'm not. Every, I net every single week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I was there. Every time we had a break, I was working. Spring break, I was working. Thanksgiving, I was working. Christmas, I was working. Every single day I was out of school, I was working. And the best story, the best part of it, when I graduated, I, of course, invited Bob Saraday and I told him, I mean, I was just crying. The best part is, where did I go to school? Well,
Right
it
back
wasn't
where
the
Daddy wanted
university.
you
Yeah,
to.
it wasn't the University of Connecticut. I couldn't afford it up there. I couldn't find a job. It certainly wasn't Fordham. It wasn't Marist. It was Western Connecticut now State University, which is my alma mater. I love that university. I mean, it is awesome. And but when I graduated, I told Bob that I wanted him there. And I mean, I rarely cry. A few times. This is one of them. I
Okay.
said, I couldn't have done it without you because I really couldn't. I didn't have enough financial backing. There was no way. My dad had already told me. He said, look, I gave you an opportunity. I'd have
Right.
paid for everything, gave you a new car. You're on your own. This is a life lesson. You're old enough. You're on your own. I'm not going to help you. And he didn't. Now, every once in a while, I'd get a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a couple of bucks here, a couple of bucks there. But it was never, I'm going to help you with tuition. It was on my own. And combat veterans did not get, like at Clemson, if you're a combat vet, you don't have to pay tuition. Not in Connecticut.
Wow.
Mm-mm. In Connecticut, they didn't have that. And
Okay.
in 1990, probably one of my dearest professors. Um, in
Uh-oh.
fact, when he retired, they do things. And this is what he did for me. The day he retired, he
Wow.
gave me that. I kind of thought it was goofy. I didn't really understand it. He's an older guy, graduated from Yale in 62, 63.
Okay.
He's the reason I teach history. His name was Dr. David Detzer. All six of his books are right here, closest to my heart. Um, one of the greatest professors I ever had. He's the reason why I teach U.S. history, or why the reason I teach history at all. We had great conversations together. Um, when I graduated, uh, I told him that I want to teach just like him. And he'd always push me to get my PhD. When he wrote a letter of recommendation for me to get a job at Lamar, he told Hanson, he said, listen, he's a great teacher. He's going to be a great asset to your school, but you better push him to get his PhD. He would be a great, you know, PhD recipient. Anyways, um, he's one of those men, you have men in your life that really kind of steered you the right way. Donaldson was my military guy. Detzer is the guy at college. And of course, Bob Saraday was the one when I was working. I mean, he was always, one of the things he told Monica, he's because she was in charge of all the dispatchers. He said, listen, if there's no work, you send him home. She knew that if I didn't work, I didn't get paid, I couldn't make my bills. So I mean, I worked for every single aspect of the cable company. Um, installer, service technician, and right down to building with the construction crew, which was I enjoyed that a lot because those guys were tough. They reminded me of rough military guys. They would sit there and they taught me how to gaff up. gaff up telephone poles.
Okay.
And, I never in my life did I ever gaff. I didn't even know how to put them on. And they showed me how to put them on. And I said, okay, let's go pump out this pole. I'm like, okay, how do I do it? I mean, how do I do it? I pumped up halfway, fell down. Pumped up halfway, fell down. When you fall, you do this. And when you do that, you get the creosote all up and down your arms that'll itch for the next month. I mean, it's miserable. And but I always had jobs. So when I graduated, I was telling you I invited Bob Saturday to my graduation. He came and he gave me a pen and pencil set. And every contract I've ever signed for the first probably 20 years of my career as a teacher, I would bring that pen and pencil set because teachers have to sign every year. They have to sign a contract. I would use that pen set that Bob gave me. Um, I haven't used it in a decade, but the first 20 years I sure enough did. And he was something. And I remember telling him, I said, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here. And he looked at me and said, no, man, you did this on your own. I said, no, you don't understand. I wouldn't have been able to financially have done this. I wouldn't have. You would have found a way, he said. I didn't do anything. All I did was just give you an opportunity. And you're the one that, proved it, proved me wrong. I didn't think part-time workers. So, but yeah, so in the middle of school, it was my just getting ready to go into my senior year of college, and it's 1990, 91. We're drill sergeants. And it is August of
Gulf War.
1990. You got it. And Saddam jumped over into Kuwait. And I remember going to drill that weekend. And our first sergeant, oh, I wish I remembered his name. He used to do push-ups on his thumbs. Call him, do push-ups with me. And he'd do push-ups on his thumbs. I swear to God. And God, I can't remember his name. He was a great guy. And he came out and said they're looking for volunteers. They need volunteers to augment some of these companies that are going over to the Gulf War or to Desert Shield. Who wants to volunteer? Well, I immediately raised my hand. I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And there was one other guy that signed up, just the two of us. And I had to go home and tell my girlfriend at the time, who later will be my first wife. I had to tell her that I couldn't tell her we volunteered because she'd have killed me. So I told her that we all had to volunteer, that it was one of those things we all had to volunteer. And she didn't believe that. I had a friend that was going to college with me. He was my friend. He was a drill sergeant too. He was a leg, typical leg. He didn't sign. He told Carolyn, we didn't have to volunteer because she said, did you have to volunteer too? He goes, oh, hell no. I was going to volunteer for that shit. I'm not going over there. And she says, but
Oh,
he said volunteer. And so,
it's voluntold. Come on.
yeah, but she wasn't upset with me. She was more agitated with him. And then when I finally left, which was that September, I'm now, I'm in the middle of a semester. I'm like, fuck. Detzer was just white as a ghost. You got to understand this guy, you know, his father was a World War II veteran. He went to school all
Vietnam.
during Vietnam. Uh, he told me, and this is something that he said, I don't know if I regret it, but I thought I did my part. If you had a deferment in college, if you to get out of the draft, it wasn't as easy as somebody saying, I got a deferment. Like, you have George W. Bush that got a deferment, um, or Bill Clinton got a deferment. You also have to have a 3.0 average to keep that deferment.
Ah,
Well, if you're under a 3.0 average, and it's the same thing with high school too. There were 18-year-old kids that were getting, drafted while they were in their senior year of high school.
okay. I didn't
And
know
if
that.
yeah, I didn't either until I'm a history teacher. So yeah, they were drafted. They didn't say, okay, we'll wait till you finish high school. You were drafted. You could finish it when you get back. And unless you had a 3.0 average. So Detzer told me, he says, I don't know, you may be upset with me, but I gave all my male students during those years, I gave them all B's, even if they didn't deserve it. And he
Mm,
says, I don't know how you feel about that. I said, well, you did what you thought was right. And I did what I thought was right because this was done after I came back from the Gulf War. We had that
okay.
conversation. And he was
Now, how
asking,
did you guys receive that news? Obviously, information now travels literally at the speed of a click. You're not watching it live.
no, not
So
yet.
how does how do we find out Saddam is playing games? And then what does that
Well,
look like?
he crossed over into Kuwait and took it over in August of 1990. And
And when
they
do
had
you find out?
I found out through the news. I found out that, but I didn't, you got to understand, again, strong ranger, smart ranger, I'm the strong ranger. I didn't really put two and two together. I didn't even think that it was anything. I mean, I know now.
Right.
I know that George, H.W. Bush told him that we had no interest in the Middle East when Saddam asked him. I now can put two and two together and realize that with the Cold War completely coming to an end, that this is all, you know,
Dog and pony show.
we no longer need Saddam. We no longer need that other bearded wonder guy by the name of bin Laden, who
Right.
was fighting the Russians,
Right.
and we were giving them
We've
weapons.
created our own enemies.
Oh, absolutely, we did. I tell my students that they flip out. But I didn't know any of that stuff. I mean, I was never able to put that stuff together quick enough. Uh, but when they said that that's what was going on, I mean, I immediately said, "Yeah, I'm gonna volunteer. I want to be a part of, you know, you know, Grenada. I can't tell you anything about Grenada. So who about Grenada? I tell my students all the time. So let me tell you how, there's different categories of points of view,
Right.
and gender has a lot to do with, the way your point of view is different. And age is really big. Grenada, I was too scared to tell you anything. I was pissing my pants. I remember I'd signed, before graduation that March. I remember sitting in my shower downstairs. I'll never forget it. Sitting in my, you know, in my bathroom showering, and I'm on my knees crying, thinking I'm going to get killed. I mean, I read the books. I saw war stories, war movies and stuff. I'm like, I'm going to get killed, and then Grenada happens. I'm like, that's October. You got to remember, September 7th, I turn in 83. I turn, 19 years old. I'm a baby. I'm still 18 years old, you know. So when you ask, I can't tell you anything. I can tell you that it was short, but for me, it was a lifetime. I
Right.
can tell you anything that went. Oh, you said, did you get shot at? Yes. Well, I can tell you whoever shot at me was probably our own people, and it was so far away, but it felt like it was right by you. Okay. The first Gulf War, I'm 26 years old, and it wasn't like I was chomping at the bit wanting to go. It was that as an E6, I wanted to earn my medal. And I'm talking about mission essential task list
Right.
to
You have
to
to prove
prove,
yourself.
yeah, absolutely, to prove that, these stripes mean something, that I didn't just get them because I was in the military. And those DA photos, don't tell me, I'm not going to get into that. I know why you have DA photos.
Right.
I just happen to be the right whatever. But, I wanted to make sure that I could handle that type of stress, especially as an E6. And we had a great first sergeant. He was a drill sergeant. Roland was his name. He's from Connecticut. Great. He was actually drill sergeant of the year. Uh,
Wow.
Probably 86 or 87. I remember seeing his picture in Soldiers Magazine. And I remember seeing it going, man, this guy's from Connecticut. Cool. He was the reserve, because they would pick a reserve drill
Right.
sergeant of the year and a regular Army drill sergeant of the year. And he was the reserve. And so once he got that, immediately he became a first sergeant.
Right.
And so now he has to augment his unit, and he was looking for hard charges. We were an MP unit, but we were escorting all the prisoners back to Halfa Albatine, back to the collection area. And
That,
so you're up in the middle of this shit picking up these prisoners. And he needed infantrymen, and there was a couple of, and he picked a lot of drill sergeants. There were four of us that were all former drill sergeants that worked on or around him. Um, but I mean, I didn't join because I wanted to go kill people. That's not, nobody does that. We're honorable Christian men. That's That's something that, I always tell folks when we talk about this, man, you're asking, somebody to kill a man that they don't even know enough to hate. They say, well, we do it for freedom in America. That's why we fight. And I got to tell a lot. I told my kids this was just, of course, last week we were off, but this was just the week before, and we were talking about finishing up World War II. And they said, well, you have a lot of experience in war, and these guys were patriotic. They did it for the flag, they did it for our freedom, and you did it for our freedom. And I'm like, no, I didn't. I didn't fight any of these wars for your freedom, so you can go around and burn the flags or talk shit or whatever it is you want to
Right.
do. I did it for the guy to the left of me and the guy to the right of me. That's why I did
100%.
this, not for you guys. I mean, I love y'all and I love being an American, but I didn't do this for this. I did it because the balloon went up and my number was called. That's it. And I'm not gonna, like anything else I did in the military, I'm not going to not do what I'm supposed to do. If you send me to a school, I'm gonna do everything in my power to finish it because I can't go back a loser. It was something that was just instilled. I'm not talking about the second best shed or if you didn't win a state championship or any of that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about drive, ambition,
Mhm.
pushing yourself, you know. Not finishing RAM in 2023 was or 2024 was devastating to not finish that. It was crushing. And if it hadn't been for you, I don't know what would have happened. It would have been a regret all my life because I don't think, and Chris can tell you, there's no way I can do it on my own. My lungs won't allow me to do it. I'm so fucked up with sinusitis and stuff that,
Neither
you
could
know,
I, brother. That's what I had to let my ego go and
yeah,
realize it's not about me. I don't, what do I need to prove?
that's it. You're right. But it's
But,
hard. It's
oh,
hard.
absolutely. Because I'm talking to Greg about this as well. The infantryman, the unspoken creed is pride. And it, man, when you lose that, I mean, that's like a life defining thing.
Yeah.
And it took me years to be okay with myself because I felt like I let that part down.
Right.
And literally, not until we finished ramp did I accept, okay, I am enough. 6 years later, out of getting out of the army, like, okay,
Right.
I'm good. And I know how you felt. And that's why when we met, I said, one, I'm going to test you. And I tested everybody. Um, but my concern, hey, you got a lot of experience. I'm a I'm a young guy. Sometimes you can't teach an old first sergeant new tricks.
Hmm.
And when you started to work through your healing journey as I asked you to do, I went, okay, he's he's definitely still got it. And I don't doubt his capability. I never doubted that for a moment. But will you be a team player? Because I know a lot of guys get into ultra, they're not team players.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And that's the hard part. We're, Rusty Dogs of War is the most eclectic group of fucked up individuals I think we could put together.
Right.
But we're all there for each other, not just ourselves.
Well,
So
that's the thing. It's like when when the Gulf War ended, when we came back, which was in June of 91, you know, I can tell you that every person that we came in contact over there were evil people, and that whatever happened to them, happened to them. I didn't lose and shed a tear. I had no remorse for anything I did over there. Of course, it was all done, to the letter of the military law, but I had no remorse. And I think it had a lot to do with age because um, that happens and everything starts to move. My first sergeant Roland becomes a command sergeant major. I had a big, huge party for him at the Curtis House, which was my father's favorite restaurant. I told you it's the oldest inn in Connecticut, the second oldest inn in the entire country. It's
Wow.
Curtis House there in Washington. God dog it, not Washington Depot. It's Lee, Ed. It'll come to me where it is, but and I hate not anyhow. Woodbury, Woodbury, Connecticut. Oldest in, and we had a big party for him, big celebration, and it was a lot of fun to see him get, his star. But I went on, I graduated, and because of what happened in Iraq, I say that it didn't change me. It did, because as soon as I graduated, I got this job in Mississippi teaching at a private school called Lamar. And the first thing I did was I left. My time was up, and I mean, you're talking about here it is 1994,
Yeah.
right? 1993. I get the job, yeah, 94, because I get the job. It took me a while. I finally get the job here in Mississippi. So, you know, um, all those years, from 83, you're talking about over a decade in the military, and now I'm done. And I'm happy, and I don't care. And I'm not thinking about retirement. I'm not thinking about benefits. I'm not thinking about any of that. I'm like, screw this. I'm a school teacher. And, you know, I'm down here teaching, and it's a small little private school. And I remember the Nancy Greer, who, another wonderful lady, she's the reason why I'm here in Mississippi. She told the boss, I don't know what it is. This guy called from Connecticut. I don't know him from Adam, but he just sounded like a good guy. I think you should hire him. This is a secretary telling the headmaster, I just have this thing. I think he's going to be a good guy. And there's no interview. He calls me
Wow.
on the phone. I mean, I can't come down for an interview. I don't have two nickels to rub together.
Right.
I mean, I'm broke as a joke. And he's like, let me get this straight. If I give you this job, you're actually going to pack up everything, your wife, three cats, and come all the way down here, and you've never been to Mississippi? I said, I love the South. I'd spent my lifetime in the military down there. He said, well, this isn't Georgia, son, and this isn't North Carolina. This is Mississippi. I said, that's okay. I said, I just want to teach. He said, and I want to coach. I can coach hockey. And he said, well, we don't have hockey teams around here. He said, but I can use an assistant, little, assistant football coach. I'm like, well, I played football. That's another story in itself. So here I am. I packed up this U-Haul with mother's attic in the back, put the car on a hitch, and we're driving to Mississippi. It took us 2 days. We had to stop in Tennessee. I was hoping to get here in one day because we didn't have a lot of money. And my dad had given me some money for the move, but we needed it for down payment for rents and stuff. And we get to Meridian, Mississippi, and I'm asking where Lamar High School is, and nobody can seem to tell me where it is. And finally, one guy at Allstate Insurance Company, he says, "Yeah, I know where it is. My son goes there." And he drove me and showed me where it was, and I got to meet my boss for the first time. And he says, wow, you're really here. I said, I am. I kept calling him. When I was in Virginia, I said, I'm in Virginia. He says, that's good. We'll see you soon. I'm in North Carolina. That's good. We'll see you soon. And the third time I called him, he goes, look, I promise you, you have a job. I was so worried I'd get down here and, a psych. I was just joking, you know. But yeah, sure enough, I was here. But with that said, I didn't have a contract for
Mm.
3 months. No contract. I could not understand why I didn't have a contract. I didn't even know what I was getting paid until I got my first check. And you want to talk about man, son, I was making more part-time at the cable company,
Wow.
working 3 days a week than I did as a school teacher down here. I'm like, oh my God. And oh, by the way, no benefits, but I'm young. I don't need any
Right.
benefit. What the hell do I need benefits for? I literally just turned 30 that
Okay.
September. What the hell do I need benefits for? I'm strong as an ox. And but I mean, the pay was like, holy cow. And so Nancy comes to my door, and one of the things I hated was, and to this day, 32 years teaching, I hate it. When I'm teaching, don't disrupt me for bullcrap. If somebody's calling me, take a message.
Right.
If it's that important, unless somebody's dying, like 9/11, that's different. You called me because I have people up in New York. Yeah, okay, now I get it. I understand. But she's knocking on the door. I'm like, man, what can possibly be that important that you have to cut into my lesson? And she said, there's this army recruiter here, and I really would like him to talk to your class. I'm thinking, in the middle of class. I
Ah,
don't want this clown talk. Well, you're the only one on staff that has any military experience. Like, okay, when? She goes, now? I'm like, oh, that's just great. So here comes this guy.
fuck me, right?
Yeah, big E6 guy, and he comes in and he's looking around my room, and I have my little glory wall right over my desk. And he goes, wow, dude, you were an E6? You were in Grenada? Holy crap. No, you were a ranger? I said, yeah, yeah. He says, and a drill sergeant? I said, yeah. I said, I literally just got out after, I graduated. He goes, you need to come because he did his spiel.
Of course.
Now you understand, none of my kids, they're private school.
Right.
They're all going to college. And yes, eventually they'll come around after the first year of, freshman, oops, I didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
They'll go and join the military because they got to pay for it themselves because their parents aren't, you
Mhm.
know. Um, but they're not going to join right away. So class is dismissed. He hangs around a little bit and he looks at me and he goes, man, you really need to get into the reserves. I can get you in. He said, there's this great reserve unit in Camp Shelby, Mississippi. It's just like 90 miles. It's in Hattiesburg. I'm like, yeah, okay. So he goes, I'll make you a deal. Join, and I'll make sure you keep your rank. And I said, really? He says, yeah. The only reason why I joined,
Need the
I
money.
needed to supplement my freaking income. And so here I am back in the military. And it was cool. I remember sitting in this brand new unit that they created. It was created just like they created, the Army is really brilliant. Even though we're successful in the three engagements and three wars that I was in, we were successful in Grenada. There was big, huge problems, and they fixed them. They corrected them.
Uh-huh.
After Iraq, or the first Gulf War, they immediately realized there's problems. Now you got Jessica Lynch getting hauled off with her crew. We're lost. We have combat support units that are now part of the frontline troops that don't know anything. They don't know how to set up a rendezvous point. They know no infantry skills. So they were creating a unit specifically all over the country, specifically for that. And our jobs were to exercise these units like transportation units. We have big transportation units in Mississippi and Alabama, and they would come in, and my job, because of my infantry skills, and Speed, who's another ranger, because of his infantry skills, we were going to be op 4,
Right.
and we were in our own. We had, because Camp Shelby had been closed. It was a National Guard post, but most of it had been closed since we integrated. Nobody knows this, but Camp Shelby was the major post for World War I and World War II vets. So World War I and World War II soldiers going overseas.
Uh,
Number one post. And it was a general that refused Truman's orders to desegregate.
okay.
And so he said, fine. Now, when you walk through Camp Shelby, there are sidewalks that you'll bump into that go on forever, but they don't go anywhere. You're walking, and all of a sudden you trip over a huge concrete pad that once was a barracks.
Okay.
He burned it to the ground and salted it over. He's a farmer from Missouri. Remember? That's what he
Right.
did. He was a Missouri farmer. And the quote, burn it and salt it over so nothing ever grows there. And for a very long time, Camp Shelby, nothing grew there. National Guard had their post there, and it's just been recently since Iraq that now the post is really starting to be more and more successful. But here I am. I get my E7 straight away and loving life, meeting some great people, great friends, having a time of my life, making good money, and I become I come up on the list for E8. And my thing is, and I think I've told you this before, I'm not going to be three up, three down. I want three up, three down diamond. I want that leadership position. I want to be a first sergeant in charge of a company. And so there was a company in Montgomery, Alabama, the 282nd, and they were looking for a first shirt. And lo and behold, that's where I wound up. And I stayed there until my retirement. Um, I was there for 9 years, I think, 8 years, something like that, maybe seven, uh, before Iraq in 2003. And I took 219 guys over. I remember sitting down months before we were actually activated and having to augment my unit, just like Roland. I remember calling Roland saying, "What do I do here?" He says, "Get the very best. Get the very, very best." And I said, "Okay." He says, "So let me tell, what's the demographics of your unit?" I said, "Why would that matter?" He said, "It matters." And I said, "Well, we're from Montgomery, Alabama." He says, "Okay, two of us are white." He says, "Augment them with all white soldiers." And I'm like, "Why?" He said, "Because when you go overseas and you come into contact with a battalion or whatever, they might look at you differently. There's going to be that, well, they might give you duties that are ridiculous or whatever. Just trust me." And so I did that, sort of, kind of. I mean, you couldn't, but me
Right.
and Captain Champion sat down and he said kind of the same thing. He said, "Top, we really kind of have to be a little bit more diversified when we go overseas." And I'm like, I don't understand all this. He said, "You should understand all of it. You're a freaking history teacher. You should understand all of it." And I said, "It's time for us to break down those barriers and be colorblind. For God's sakes, we're green, dude. And now we're sand colored.
Right.
There should be none of this talk." He said, "Just let's look." And we augmented. We had 19 people we had to augment. And even before we left, God dog, I lost like four or five, because of various reasons. One person had medical issues, another one, it was
Oh yeah.
became a bit of a shit show.
Family,
And
whatever. Things
oh
happen.
yeah, and I became agitated because it was like, "Look, guys, the balloon went up. We got to go.
Yeah.
And we're family. We keep talking about we're family for family. You're leaving your family behind, and you're going to put us at a terrible disadvantage." One particular guy you know, uh, in particular, I sat there and I said, "Look, man, I'm telling you, you leave us, we're fucked because you have such an important role." And we were, man, we didn't have half of the stuff we needed to be, mission capable because we didn't have him. We were talking about the war in Iraq,
Correct.
and
So
it's
you guys
2000.
were
Yeah,
picking your unit
yep.
and dealing
Augmented my
with the
unit.
intricacy of the segregation that we act like doesn't exist, but it still does in some capacity. And
It is a little bit,
how I'm curious, how did your commander and your boss, maybe they didn't tell you directly, but how did they think that would affect you negatively, potentially downrange?
Well, I'll tell you right now. So my first, when I first got there, the only other, guy that was white was my driver. That was it. And it was just the two of us, and we fit in well. It took me about 3 months for the unit to realize that I wasn't there to, step on their backs and look for another rank. I told them, I said, "Look, I'm 31 years old. I'm one of the youngest first sergeants. I mean, I am the youngest first sergeant in battalion and one of the youngest ones in the division. So I'm not looking for anything. I have a lot of time left to make sergeant major. I'm not looking to step on your backs for the next rank. And that's all they've ever had. They'd have first sergeants come in and they'd go off to AT and they'd set them up with all the crappiest, shittiest details. You know, we go off to California to NTC. We have a real world mission. The entire division that we're with, we're not there for them. We're just there because they're there, and we wind up their damn sergeant majors. We get out there and he says, "Hey, we need concertina wire around our compound," and I'm like, "Well, that's great." I said, "I'll do my section," which I would have. I'll do my section. And he looks at me and he goes, "No, you're going to do all of it." And I said, "No, I don't think that's possible, Sergeant Command Sergeant Major." I said, "We have a real world mission. We actually are doing something here." And all the, there are five other companies and they're not doing any. There is no mission for them. They're just out there.
Right.
And there's no real mission for them. But we had a real mission that we had to complete. And there was no way I could do this. I mean, we'd be doing it at night. And I said, I'm not going to do that. And he goes, "Yes, you are." And I said, "Look, with all due respect, Sergeant Major," I said, "we don't have it. I'll do my part. I'll do my little area that we're at, and I'll link up with the other company first sergeants, and they can pick up and do theirs." And I walked out. Well, the guy that was with me his name is John. He's Sergeant E5, John Majors. He's the one, unfortunately, I had to put on the flag. He had just passed from cancer not too long ago. And he was one of my favorite soldiers, big old guy, played football for Alabama A&M, big, big kid. And he was there and he overheard me with the sergeant major saying, "We're not going to do that. We'll do our section and that's it." And there's not anything you can do. I mean, what are you going to do?
Right.
Send me home? I mean, come on.
And
So
is
I
he
walked
even in your
out.
chain of command?
Huh?
Was he even in your chain of
No,
command?
no, no, no. We just happened. We were there and we shared a compound together. That was it. And for him to sit there and he was it was a Tennessee unit, make me do that. I'm not going to have my kids do or my soldiers do all that. That's ridiculous.
Right.
And John Majors went over to the other guys in the unit and said, "This sergeant, this first sergeant, he's a pretty good guy." And, I don't think he'd ever abuse us. I mean, this is a family. Now,
Right.
this unit in Montgomery, when they join, they stay. I mean, they're in that unit because that's where they're from. They all work together. They're families. They're married to one another. I mean, they don't leave that unit. I mean, there was one guy that I had to put him on the flag too. I just found out that he had died years ago from cancer. And he was an older gentleman who was an E4. And I used to sit there and say, if you went you know, to the other
VOC.
unit, you could become an E5. He goes, "I don't want to be an I don't mind being an E5 first sergeant, but I don't want to leave. This is my family." And that's when I
Mm.
realized what this unit really was. And so it was a great unit, and I was able to fit in pretty well. And my driver, Troy, was just as good. Captain Champion and I, we were tight. We were both pretty new. Captain Champion had been there like maybe 6 months before I arrived. We worked well. We were both Persian Gulf War vets, so we worked really well together. And he kept me out of a lot of trouble when we went overseas. I talked to he
It's
did, he
supposed
really
to be
did.
the other way around, boss.
Oh no, he kept me out of a lot of trouble. Little things. Um, anyhow, but I think with this one, when the balloon went up and we were getting ready to go, because of my age, and at that time I was 38,
Okay.
and it wasn't that I wasn't ready for it. It was my perspective of war had changed greatly. And instead of looking at these people in Iraq as evil, I looked at them as human beings that are just trying to do like every other human being on the planet,
Survive.
all 8 billion of us, just trying to survive daily life, provide for their families. And that's it. No one's out to, no one's looking to become a billionaire overnight or any, just basic living. And, when we went back, when I went back, this time in 2003. It was the first iteration. The war hadn't started. We were attached to Third ID. It was difficult as a unit, like we were combat support. It was difficult for us. We didn't have a lot of equipment over there. Um, Hell, we didn't even have tents. It was pretty bad. We
So
had
what'd you
no
guys
way.
sleep with?
Well, we we acquired a lot of stuff along the way,
Of course,
and
tactical acquired.
yeah, we had no way of moving any of the stuff, and we acquired an SMP. And I remember one of the guys that keeps up with me all the time, we talk maybe once every 2 or 3 months. I said, where'd we get that truck from? He goes, Top, you don't want to know, but we got all of our stuff in there and we got to move forward. And so I didn't want to know. It was the same thing in the first Gulf War.
Don't ask questions you
Acquiring
don't want
things.
answers to.
Yeah, and so we were mission ready, and leadership with Captain Champion and Dud Ludwig, who's a full bird colonel. I love this guy to death. Uh, Martin Chavez, he was a chief warrant officer too. Um, he'd always say, "My name is Martin Chavez." I said, "Okay," and then you'd call his phone, and he'd say, "Please leave a message. This is Martin Chavez," and I'm just like, and if you said anything like that, he would grill you and he'd get pissed at you and say, it's Martin. And I'm like, I don't know, on your phone, it's Martin Chavez. But we get over there, we're attached to a unit out of well, we go up there with Third ID. We get to BIOP, Baghdad International. And then we kind of went our separate ways. We were attached to a unit, a battalion out of Germany, and we were their seventh company. There's only
Wow.
six companies to a battalion, but we're number seven because there was nothing for us to do, and so we're attached to this unit. Um, and things were pretty smooth. We set up our tents. We had a little area that we set up our tents. We had to sandbag them because we would get, I don't know, maybe once every 2 weeks, I guess, we'd get, some mortars over, and the people across the wadi in a small little village didn't like us at all. Little,
Of course.
yeah, like a little farming community. And we were set up in a place called Balad, which was oh God dog it. Oh Lord have mercy. It'll come to me in like 2 seconds. Not oh God Lord, the biggest uh airstrip in the entire Middle East. And
Bagram?
huh?
Bagram?
No, no, no. This is Camp Anaconda, for God's sakes, Ed.
Okay.
Lord have mercy. That's what happens when you get old. You start kind of like, forgetting that, but it's there. Anyways, yeah, so we're at Anaconda, and we were the first ones in there, cleaned up, set stuff up. Um, and it was okay, but there was missions that were coming down where gun trucks and moving stuff north, and so we had to provide 8 gun trucks, and for me, it was the stuff that I didn't do, things that I should have done, and I didn't. You know, we thought we were going home. I mean, we're attached to a battalion that's getting ready to leave, and they left, and we were still there. And then another unit comes in, another battalion, and they get ready. We do what we do with them. We work. We're still doing these missions. We get stuck up in Fallujah for golly, it seemed like forever. It was like 18 days, 19 days before we finally were able to come back. And then it was almost impossible. It was October. It was almost of '03. It was almost impossible to get through Baghdad because they had taken out 9 of the bridges out of 11, and they had taken out 9. And it was miserable. It was scary, and it was difficult. You were on your toes every time you went out. Um, I think it was May that the war apparently was officially over. I can tell you, sitting there, it wasn't.
Right.
Um, you know, WMDs, when we had a unit that was next to us, and every day they would go out looking for these things and they'd come back with the same. There's nothing out there. And I kind of knew that anyways. I mean, I was there 13 years earlier. Um, it was just one, it was a constant for me. It was just a constant of just, it was a shit show. But with 219 guys, I wasn't going to let them know that we
Of
shouldn't
course.
be there. That was not my job. My job was to make sure they all went over, and my job was to make sure they all came back. And you know, and that's what I did. I had a lot of guys that would ask me, "Top, you think we should be here? You're a historian, you're smart." And I would say, "Look, we have a rendezvous with destiny. That's it. We have a job to do. We're going to complete our mission, and we're all going to go home. That's it. We're here because the President of the United States, our commander in chief, said we need to be here, and we're going to be here until the job is done. And
Right.
that's it. I'm not going to say anything negative. I'm not going to complain about it, you
It's
know.
not going to change it. So,
Mm-mm. But I'll tell you right now, those are the demons. When I got back home, 15, 16 months later, man, I was fine. I knew that I had changed a lot. I was different. Went back to school. Uh, I had a big, huge celebration, and I missed their graduation a lot. I missed I coached cross country and track
okay.
for 11 years, and my cross country team was the best in the state of Mississippi every year. I mean, we did wonderful. We won 3 state championships. We were really, really good, gifted runners. And if we weren't winning, we were coming in second. We were getting beat by a Louisiana team, most of those times. And because the Meridian the private schools, uh, we also
Compete in a
service out.
different league.
Yeah, we also service Alabama, and we have a couple of schools in Alabama and a couple from in Louisiana that are part of our division. So we had to race against them. But I got back and you know, I missed their graduation. My top 5 runners that were with me since 6th grade,
Wow.
and it was tough. In fact, just yesterday, one of the kids that was on those teams, came to visit me, Latham Farley. He's living in Ohio right now, and it was nice seeing him. I hadn't seen him in 20 years. Jay Grantham, he was probably pound for pound, he was the very best runner, got a scholarship to run for Ole Miss, which at the time had one of the better track teams in the SEC and
Okay.
cross country programs. But I got back. And I just wasn't the same. A lot of people kind of noticed that there was a difference. Different. I was different. I didn't want to, I don't know. I'd get up and we'd go to school every day and I would teach and I just look at these kids and I would be like, you have no clue. I had 3 guys that were 17 years old that turned 18 over there. And here I have seniors that are 17 and some that were 18. And I'm like, God, you just don't know. You have no
Right.
clue. And that's not me. I've never looked at a student like that. And we 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 won the state championship that year. With a whole bunch of kids that I've never really even seen, but we're really decent runners. That's when my back was starting to really flare up. Um,
Okay.
Running, that was the toughest part, not being able to do what I wanted to do. I was limited because of my injury from Iraq. I just shit. But got an opportunity to teach at Meridian High School, which is it's a 7A school. It's one of the biggest schools in the state of Mississippi. Um, and I did, and people were they couldn't believe it. I mean, they're like, dude, you're an institution here at Lamar. Are you crazy? I'm like, no, I'm going to Meridian High. That's crazy. That's insane. Why would you do that? And I don't think anybody really understood why. I was just, it had nothing to do with money. It had nothing, I was married, kid on the way. In 2005, Hayes was born. Um, think about 8 months after that, I retired from the military that January of '06, had a sergeant major of battalion hand me my chevrons and say, "You're the new command sergeant major of the battalion. It's yours." I told him, I said, "Sergeant Major, I'm leaving. I'm retiring. I have someone taking my place." See, we had stop loss, but for E8s and E9s, you just had to have somebody replace you. Those are hard positions to get. And so the SE7 was becoming an E8, and it was mine was the only slot open. And I remember him coming in saying, "No, this isn't for me." And I said, "Oh, yes, it is. It is for you. You already signed the dotted line." Because he knew in about 8 months, 9 months, they were going back over, and they did. And, the command sergeant major knew that less than 3 months, they were getting ready to get shipped out. And so wanting me to become a command sergeant major, and I was there. I mean, and that's all I ever wanted to do. I had all these degrees, you know, and everybody's saying you should be an officer. This is crazy. You can make more as a captain retired than you can as an E9, and they're right. But it wasn't about the money with me. At that point, all I wanted to do was be a command sergeant major. And now it's right there. And I wasn't gonna, it was we talked about God working in mysterious ways. Hayes is almost a year old. He is a year old. And I'm getting ready to leave the military. Had I and it wasn't very long after that my wife divorced, we got divorced. And Hayes, I had custody of him. What would have happened if I took that position as command sergeant major and 3 months later I'm overseas and she's doing what she was doing? What would have happened? What would have happened to my son? So when I say God works in mysterious ways, it's not about me. When Hayes was born, it was about him. And that's all that really mattered to me. And I knew staying in the military, that wasn't going to help. And I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't in the, I can't explain it. I wasn't in the right frame of mind. What we did over there, you know, the things that I saw and the destruction. It's like, you know, we have the final year of what we call COVID babies that are now getting ready to graduate, and now we can get back to normal. But
Right.
yeah, and those kids we had to kind of treat with kid gloves because they lost so much. And when you go overseas and you have something like this in Iraq, and you're talking about two wars in 13 years time, and the 20 long years that we fought in Iraq and occupied, the damage that we've done to an entire generation or two. Did we
On both
leave?
sides,
Oh,
in the
absolutely.
US and over there.
Sure. And did we leave them better than what we got them at? And,
I,
I can tell you, no, we didn't. I mean, if they didn't like Saddam Hussein, he'd been there for almost 30 years, they would have gotten rid of him. But that's politics, and that's not, as a soldier, that's not my job you
right.
know, to try and
Unfortunately, that's above our
discuss it.
pay grade.
Right. So, but we talked a lot about, trying to get right. And when you have an injury, um, and you can't do the things that you once were able to do, like my running was my everything. It was the things that, I'd have an argument with one of my students, about a grade or whatever. I'd go out for a run right after that, and it would clear my head, and I would feel, and all of a sudden I'd come back, and instead of jumping on that child or, getting irritable or taking it, personally, it just, I was able to come up with a better solution, and it made me a better teacher, it made me a better person. That's gone. And coming back from Iraq and what little running I was able to do before I finally, my back finally gave up and said, that's it, you can't run anymore. And you had a doctor say, that's it, you can never run again. That was the only thing that kept me in somewhat control. And
How did you injure your back?
um overseas jumping off of what, those 2 foot, those 2-story buildings are like 12 feet. And we were on
Right.
top of a roof, trying to figure out a way to get the hell out. And we found a way to jump off this, I jumped off this roof, and I didn't think I did much of anything. I couldn't bend from that point forward. I wasn't able to bend down. But I've been through that before. So even before Iraq, I've had problems with my back. And I think a lot of it's got to do with all the equipment that you're humping.
Hmm.
I mean, infantry, you're walking everywhere. And then you're jumping. I mean, I got 64, jumps under my
Right.
belt,
Our bodies are not made to withstand the forces.
yeah. And especially with the T4 and T1010, like now I see the type of
Parachutes.
parachutes. They seem like they're more forgiving when you hit the ground. Man, we were hitting like a sack of potatoes almost every time. You never really had I think there was only one time that I actually did a standing landing and immediately went down to my ass because I knew what was going to happen if they found me standing. Because that
Right.
was one of the things. You do a PLF. If you don't do a PLF, you're going to get Article 15.
No
Okay.
shit.
Oh hell, man, you had people all the time trying to do standing landings and stuff. So they cut it out. They would threaten you. I don't think anybody ever got but here I am, and it was we were on Sicily, okay, and we jump in. That's one of the longer in the 80 in Fort Bragg. That's one of the longer landing strips, and I landed straight up, and I'm like, holy cow! And then I went right to my ass because I knew I don't want anybody catching me. But that's probably what it was, all of that. And we're getting more and more information about like the sinusitis and you know all this other crap, and
The
I'm not
burn
gonna really,
pits and all the
yeah,
things that you're exposed to that good, bad, or indifferent, you don't have a choice. It's like,
no, you don't say anything to anybody you know how the military is. I mean, all they're going to do is give you, Ranger candy, give you
mhm.
800 milligrams of Motrin and go on, tie
Take a
some
knee,
rope.
change your socks,
That's it, bud.
keep
I
your head
mean,
up in full security, son. Keep going.
that's it. It's always been that way, and I don't have a problem with it. And I think the Army realizes that right now because I know the VA has been really good for me. They really have been, positive because I don't have any of this stuff on my record. I didn't sit there and say, "Hey guys, the reason why I'm not in the prone position is because I can't get down on the ground."
Right.
You know, so, but I think as you age, when you get older, and I talked to Greg about this because he's young, he's only 54, maybe 56, something like that. But I talked to him. I said, when you start getting older, you start looking at things differently. You put your head on your pillow, man, thoughts creep in there and stuff that you were able to keep at bay for a long, long time. All of a sudden they're there.
Yeah, he calls it Pandora's box. I think
Yeah.
that's really the best description I probably ever heard. Unfortunately, it's so true. You either if you can fall asleep, you can't stay asleep, or you can't fall asleep. And it's kind of one of the two. You
Yeah.
toss and you turn, and you want it to go away, and you try to deal with it. I'm curious, how have you dealt with the demons? The Obviously you said coming back from Iraq, it changed you. What have you found to be effective?
I think in the beginning when my wife and I got divorced, my whole responsibility shifted to Hayes.
Okay.
And so he took up so much of my time and so much of my thoughts. everything from God, am I going to be able to do this to, how am I going to pay for college? All that stuff
You
was
didn't have time to think, probably.
not really, no, but you know, I keep him out of the loop. I don't talk to anybody about, I never tell war stories. Students ask all the time. I just had one recently, you know, say, come on, man, tell me, I know you've seen some stuff. And I looked at him and he's a good kid. And I said, how do you tell a true war story? And he goes, well, you would because you were there. You're a primary source. And I said, well, that's the educated reason. I'm a primary source,
Start
but
out with no shit. There I was.
yeah, I told him straight up. I said, a true war story is one that's never spoken. And he said, then how's it a true war story if it's never spoken? I said, because usually, not all the time, but usually when guys tell stories, they're usually just that. They're just stories. And you hear them all the time. If somebody comes out and tells you, yeah, we did this and I did this and I killed this and usually they're just blowing smoke. Um, so I left it at that with him. But when Hayes started getting older and I realized he was doing well and I started aging, I'd hear him talking to one of his friends. One day he was talking to Austin. They're like 2 months apart. In fact, they're up at Ole Miss together. And he says, my dad screams a lot. And he goes, yeah, he yells at me too. He goes, no, he screams at night. He said, well, what do you do? He says, nothing. I'm too afraid to go in his room. What's he screaming about? I don't know. And I had a girlfriend's son who actually had to stay with me for probably about 6, 7 months because she was building a house. He was a football player, big, 6'2", big old boy. And because he was going to Meridian High School, there was a lot of garbage about she still has a big house in Bailey and you can't go to that school. You're not in the district, but she was building a house over here, which was just a block over from me. But they didn't care about that. So he lived with me, legally lived with me. And he told his mom one day, she shared it with me that he was getting up to go to the bathroom. And my door was closed. And as he was walking through the hallway to go to the bathroom, he heard me say, get out of here. Stop. Get out of here. And he told his mom said, what'd you do? She said, I turned around, went back to my room. She said, you didn't go pee? He goes, yeah, in a bottle. And all I could say was, you pissed in a bottle in the room in the back. You scared me. I said, man, you're 6'2". Anyways, but
I'm
when
curious. You opened the box. What do you attribute that to? And I know you don't like to talk about a lot of stuff, and I respect that. I'm not here to pry,
yeah,
but I want you to remember, just like we rode for others, this podcast is for others. It's
yeah,
not for me. It's not for you. We may grow through it, but somebody's going to listen to this, or a spouse, or a kid, and go, my dad, or my mom deals with that.
hmm I
What
think,
is that?
yeah, I
Night
think
terrors? Did you even know you were doing it?
no, absolutely not. You mean like yelling in my sleep? Never.
Yeah,
No, I had no idea. But
because
I
my
mean,
wife has told me the same thing.
yeah, I mean, hey, Hayes is 20 years old now, and when we did the interviews for the film, uh, I had my priest was coming over to bless my bikes, uh, and Chad Acton, who's a sports medicine guy, he takes care of me before every big race. He was coming over. And Clint Blackwell, who's my mechanic, was coming over, all three of them at the same time. And the film crew loved it because they said, okay, we're going to interview you. Then we're going to go upstairs. We're going to videotape priest blessing your bikes and blessing you and Greg and the mechanic working on it and all this stuff was coming together and they were so excited. But our interview, it was man, it was painful and it was all telling and I was getting agitated and irritable. And John knew it, and but he kept slowing down and changing the subject and then picking at that same subject. I mean, it was just like what was supposed to be, I don't
He's
know, an
he's
hour.
pretty good at what he does.
Oh, absolutely. It turned out to be 3 hours. So here are all these people in my house downstairs, just outside my library where we're doing this interview. And when the interview was finally finished, I was just, you could tell I was agitated. And I walked out and I looked at Hayes and Chad, and their eyes are like saucers. And I'm like, hey, y'all okay? Yeah, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Let's go. We got to do some stuff, Chad. And Father Augustine was there, and we went upstairs, or Augustine, and we did what we were supposed to do. But Chad told me, he said, man, we heard, and I didn't know. And so I guess if anyone out there's listening, I guess the best thing to do is to talk about it and not let it sit there and fester. I mean, I kept it in for so long, and mine's different. Mine's more of, you know, things that I should have done and I didn't, you know. It's not so much about the gore of war that keeps me up at night, although that there's some stuff that, I mean, you know,
Would you mind
that's
giving an example of what you're talking about, of either things that you should or wish you would have done, or
we had missions and they were gun trucks. We had to put together 8 gun trucks. We have no up armor. Everything is canvas, okay, or that stupid plastic. Uh, we literally had to build these ridiculous gun trucks that had sandbags wrapped around, are you ready? A white chair that you wouldn't, I mean, a white plastic chair.
like for a
Okay.
cookout.
Oh, absolutely. And that was that was Andrew Day's seat for the 50 cal.
Dear God.
No, I'm not lying to you. Now we got some sheet metal later on and we had no welding equipment. And we had to wait for people to come over that did, and Seven Trans come over and welded some stuff for us. Uh, we had one, we had a couple of doors that were up armored that we put on, but our vehicles were not made for up armor,
So the
so it
springs
wore,
weren't strong enough and the motor wasn't strong
no,
enough.
it wore stuff out. And so my biggest regret is thinking that, as everybody's going home, third ID is home, replaced by fourth ID. Fourth ID goes home, replaced by the 82nd for the second time because of the National Guard Infantry Division in Florida wasn't ready and we're still training. And they, I mean, and here we are, we're still there. We're like waiting, waiting, waiting. It's any minute now, we're going home. We kept getting told, we were told constantly. And finally, I just stopped the noise. I said, that's it. We're not going to talk about this anymore. I have a picture in my classroom where we're almost up to our ankles in mud. And we called it brown ice because it was so damn slippery. And we're sitting there taking a picture for our battalion lieutenant colonel, and that's another story. And there's not a smile on our face because we just found out that our new ID cards said indefinite, that there was no date. And that freaked a lot of my guys out. And of course, all that our colonel, that their battalion's going home and they want a stupid picture. And every time I look at that picture, it just unnerves me to think, not that because we didn't get to go home, it just because of the way
The
it was.
priorities.
Yeah. So, and even he said, I don't understand why you guys are still here. Not worried about that. We're doing our job. Period. End of story. That's our job. We'll do it. So the things that I regret the very most is putting together a volunteer group of young men uh, that were going to do these missions. And that was the only ones that did it with me. We would fill, and I mean, I'll tell you how bad it really got. It got so bad after October of '03. It got so bad on the road. It was almost a constant that an IED would go off. And, Greg would say, I got blown up 6 times. And I never understood what he meant by that. Anytime your vehicle leaves the road, no matter how far you are, you've been blown up by an IED.
Right.
And there were several times that our vehicle would lift up off the ground and hit so hard that our radio was right here. My head would hit into the damn radio and I would see stars. Okay. And so when he says I was blown up 6 times, that's what he's talking about. But it got so bad on the road that the battalion commander told every leader from first sergeants to the sergeant major to S1, S2, S3, every single person was going to do one mission with us that they were going to be part of, which was really
What, so they could
dangerous.
get their combat action badges?
No, absolutely not. To see what was actually going on out there, because when we
Mm,
told him the shit that was going on, it was pretty bad, and yet I still, still went with that all volunteer, and it's ridiculous. I should have made a duty list. I should have made a duty roster. We had, one of the guys that made every single mission, never complained about it, made every mission, who is one of my biggest regrets. Uh, we knew he was going down the road. In fact, one of the guys who I was really close with, Brian Rossbach, he was actually here about 2 weeks ago. He was driving through from Tennessee, going to New Orleans and stopped. We had dinner together. We talked a little bit, about an hour. Uh, but we talked a lot about this guy and we knew he was going down a bad road. And I tried to get him to go home because we were starting to get leave and
okay,
he refused it. And you can't push leave if they don't
right,
want it. And because I didn't want, I wasn't gonna. I mean, we were there so long. It starts with the privates and it goes up to the higher up. We were there for so long that it actually got to me. And they said, you can go home. And I'm like, no, I'm here until I'm not going back. To come back, that's
right.
insane.
To me, that's
Um,
even more of a mind fuck
oh, hell yeah. We had the
because you
booze crew.
physically leave, but you mentally never leave.
Oh, no,
And then
absolutely
you
not.
have to go back. But the
Yeah,
whole time you're home, you're checking on everybody.
right.
I, and
Uh,
and I always try to make this very clear. I didn't deploy, but my platoon did. And it wasn't, I didn't, I had the option, but I didn't trust my boss. At this point, I was on staff. And I literally told my battalion commander, I wouldn't follow you to the drinking fountain outside your office.
mhm.
So, am I going to go downrange with you? Not a chance. Not a chance. And we had like half the brigade go. So he's like, well, I want you to stay back. You're going to basically run the battalion. You're going to be our senior liaison, prep everybody. If they change the troop cap, everybody's coming. So I said, fine, I will handle that. No problem. But I was having dreams that my platoon was getting overrun.
Yeah.
And in the middle of the night, I'm texting them, Facebook, hey, what's going on? And so again, I I want to make it very clear. I did not earn a combat patch in any capacity, but my mind was there because I was constantly getting updates. I had my own BlackBerry, emails, I'm getting everything all the time. hey, somebody's got to go out. Somebody just got injured. So I 100% understand what you're saying in the way that I can.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to put into words, I think, unless you have experienced that level of closeness. I mean, for example, as my wife goes out on shift every day, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Like I don't sleep worth a shit until she's home. And I said, honestly, what you do, I think, is harder because you deploy in our city and you don't get to leave it in some godforsaken country. You have to drive by, hey, I picked up this dead body on this corner and I'm going back there tomorrow and the next day. Like you talk about constant reminders and
Right.
triggers. Jesus Christ.
No, no. That was it. I mean, it's just like, I don't know. I think for me, not breaking up the duty roster, not doing certain things, and then of course mix it in with places that you went through and put in the fact that, I mean, Ramadi, we
I was
absolutely
literally just
leveled
about
it.
to ask you about that.
Yeah, we leveled it. There was
Were
nothing
you
left.
with were you with Task Force Bruiser at all?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay.
We leveled Ramadi. We helped because we got the Marines up there. That was part of it. Same thing in Fallujah. We leveled that place. There was nothing left of it. And it's like, you go up to Tikrit and there's nothing there. I mean, I remember we had to pass by the university and I mean, it's just leveled. And all I kept thinking of was, man, when we leave this place, these people are going to have nothing to go back to. When you look at lines that are filled with, I mean, cars, and they're at the gas pumps and there's no gas, that they're being fed by us. And
Right.
here's the most oil enriched country on the entire globe, and we're
And you have
giving
no
them,
gas.
yeah, we're giving them fuel. We destroyed their economy. I point to the Saddam bills in my frame to my students all the time. I said, that's what happens when we become, I don't want to say bellicose, but that's what happens when we attempt to occupy. We tried it in Vietnam, it didn't work. Now
Mhm.
we're here in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and it doesn't work. None of that works.
No.
They're, all we do is create enemies. I mean, the suicide bombers and the IEDs, you realize they're not just killing Americans, they're killing
Each
Iraqis
other.
too. But the Iraqis are not going to blame the terrorists that are doing this. They're blaming the Americans because we're there. We're creating that. And
So point of reference. I found it interesting that when you said you went over to Desert Shield, you knew those people were evil.
right.
What is the difference? And was it age? Was
Yes.
it that's it? You knew.
It, it's age. You
Was the mission different in any
no,
capacity?
no, I don't think for me, I don't think it was about mission. I think it's age. When we're young, we're so aggressive. When I became a coach, I focused on one thing, winning state championships, winning state championships. And when it happened, I was good. And if it happened again, great. If it didn't, I'm okay. I was good for my students. I was good for my student athletes. I wasn't on their ass all the time. When it came to the state exam, as a school teacher, I wanted to be the best. I couldn't stomach the fact that, an award would go out and it didn't have my name on it as a teacher. I wanted to be the best. And, when I went to Meridian High, you have to take state exams. You're damn right I taught the state exam. I wouldn't have it any other way. And they were like, you don't have to teach the state exam. You can just teach AP. No, it went advanced placement classes,
Right.
college level classes. I'm like, no, I want the state exam. Why? Because I want to be the best in the district. I want to be the best in the state. And anytime my kids faltered, I took it personally. My students will tell you one of the reasons why they're so successful on the test, they'll tell you because I threaten them. That's not true. That we joke about that, and I do threaten. When we did, we don't have the state exam. This is the first year they took it away of the U.S. history exam, which I think was a mistake. When you have the state superintendent making a comment that yes, we can now applaud, and everybody will now be happy to know that the state exam for U.S. history is now gone. And I know of only one person in the entire state of Mississippi that's not happy with this, and he's down there at West Lauderdale High School. And you're damn right I wasn't happy.
What was the reasoning behind removing it?
Uh, Nobody knows. I don't know. Nobody shares that with me. I have no reason, none. It's stupid to take it away. But the deal is the state exam was a gauge for me. Am I doing my job?
Right.
And this was the perfect age when and I
But
tell
we
my
live in a society that doesn't value accountability. So,
no, no, they want everything handed to them. Look, I have pictures on my wall. There are a dozen of them. Kids holding $100 bill because they got a perfect score on the state exam. Okay. And I said, now those kids, obviously because they're right here on an 8 by 10 on the wall of my room, I know them. But make sure you understand this. I know them because there are pictures on the wall and I gave them $100. But the kids that failed the test, they will haunt me forever. And they don't understand that until you go into detail about what it means to fail the state exam. It means that I didn't do my job somewhere along the line. It means that that child is not going to graduate high school, which means she or he most likely are not going to get a job. They're not going to be successful. They're not going to leave a footprint, when they leave Earth. And they're all like, man, that's heavy. I said, no, it's the truth.
it's real
And if
life.
I think that way, then you should be able to say, I'll study a little bit. If I'm willing to put in the work, then you should be able to study even the littlest bit. Because honestly, you can ask any one of my students, they'll tell you, I passed the state exam and I didn't study a bit. It was just the stories Mr. A told me. And that's how I knew. That's how I passed this. And my kids get advanced or proficient or advanced. Passing basic, I'll tell them in class, if you pass this test, don't come up to me. Don't hug on me. Tell me you passed the test. I could give a damn about that. You better be proficient or advanced because I don't teach on a basic level. I don't
Is
teach on a C level. Okay. And when I do teach on a C level, you need to go ahead and ship me to my car and head me back to Meridian because I don't need to be working here no more. And that's the stuff that my students need to hear. So
right.
everything to get to the original thing about, what changes, I've always, as a young person, have always strived to try and do the very best. Always, never wanted to take shortcuts and would get agitated as hell if I didn't. I never went to West Point. I've been up there 100 times because I lived right there
Right.
and went to football games but the hatred that I have towards anybody that beats Army, you would think that I was a goddamn commandant of the damn school. I went crazy last week blowing an 11-point lead, but that's another story in itself. That what changes is you get older and your emotional side of your brain all of a sudden matures and logic starts to take over.
Right.
Reason starts to take over. And that develops over time. Um, and I think I look at, and that's why they say soldiers, by the time they're 36, they need out. They need to retire because you're not going to be a good infantryman in a war at the age of 36, 40 years old, 50 years old. You have too much reason
Right.
behind you and you start looking at things logically. Is this where we need to be? you pull
You
things
start
apart.
to see the bigger picture and realize,
Absolutely.
is it worth risking my Bubba's lives to accomplish somebody's usually political agenda
Absolutely.
that may or may not be founded?
Right.
And I'll leave it at that.
Yep. But that's it. You asked what it is, age. For me, it was age. And as I got older, it's like now, God, dog. If it wasn't for cycling, if it wasn't for that high, and if it wasn't for certain people, people like Bob Sample, who is a professor, at the time we were both professors at MCC, and I'd walk by because I taught a night class there, and I'd walk by his room, his little office, which was the size of a shoebox, and he had not one but two Bianchi frames hanging in his room. And I'm like, man, Bianchi, you ride. And he said, yeah. And he stood up and shook my hand. He goes, I know who you are. And I said, you're Bob Sample, aren't you? And he goes, yeah, you're at Abdella. And I said, I was going to kick your ass one day. See, he started teaching at Meridian High School. And all I kept hearing was, hey, man, we got this PhD who's going to be teaching biology and math at Meridian High School. And he's a former Marine. So I was going to bust his ass about being a jarhead.
Of course.
And I got up to his room and I saw his back, but he was lecturing. I was going to break into, so I didn't want to bother him. Caleb, 2 days later, I went up to his room and there's some other guy sitting in his chair, just sitting there, not teaching, sitting. So I knock on the door and I said, hey, is Dr. Sample here? He goes, uh, no, he quit. What? I ran downstairs and asked my principal, Mr. Hubbard, I said, what the hell happened to Bob? He goes, he quit us. And I'm like, damn, are you serious? A Marine quitting? He goes, he quit us. And I said, okay. Well, I found out later because I asked him, I said, Bob, you quit Meridian High. What is it? Was it too tough for you? He goes, Ed, I'm going to tell you the truth. He said, I'm a Marine aviator, but I've been around the block. Before I was a Marine aviator, I was in the Army and I was a grunt and, a trigger puller. If I spent one more minute with those kids, I would have killed some of them. Not
Wow.
one, not two, but four or five of them. He said, I was done with it. And I was just like, okay, good answer. But getting back to the riding part, at that point, I couldn't do anything. I was running in the pool. I was gaining weight. I was miserable. And I remember him telling me, he says, you should ride a bike. And I said, I have a Bianchi, and he says, well, let's go ride. Let's ride Saturday.
Same one your dad bought you?
Yeah, no, no. I still have that one. The one that I have is a 1987 Campi d'Italia. All the time. The last time they made steel, last time they made everything out of Italian. Now everything's Shimano and
Right.
whatnot. But so I get the bike out, I bring it to Butch. He cleans it up for me. Him and Chris clean it up, and I needed new tires. They put new tires on it. And I get back on the bike and there's Bob. Bob told me to meet him at Meridian High School. I met him at Meridian. I rode up there and then we rode from there. And I'm telling you, we went 7.5 miles out, 7.5 miles in, and my legs were shaking. I'm like,
And
man, and they were like,
how long ago was this?
well, this is going on almost 61, 15, 9 years now, nine
Okay.
years ago. And so we went
Wow, look
riding.
how far you've come in 9 years,
I
Ed.
know, I know. He tells me that all the time. He tells people, he said, man, I created a monster. And he did. He really did because, we would ride every Saturday, every Sunday after church, 15 miles. And we'd stop at the store and man, he eats bad. He'd always get crap, a damn gas station hot dog. And, I'm eating a gel, and he's laughing at me with his Coke. Um, then we after about 3 months of this, he introduced me to a group of riders, and we started riding longer distances. Started going more like 30 miles now. And I was feeling really good. He says, Ed, you got to get another bike, dude. This ain't gonna cut it. I said, steel's real. I did all that bullshit.
Of course.
Um, and I got online. I was looking at Bianchi's, and the prices were outrageous. Oh my God. What a difference. You know, um, I tell the story when I
You get what
bought,
you pay for.
oof, when I bought the Campi d'Italia, it's actually a Specialissimo, but they call it the Campi d'Italia Specialissimo, which was always been the top of the line of Bianchi even today. Um, so I started looking at used Bianchis, and I got this beautiful Bianchi from a guy in New York, carbon everything, carbon wheels,
Right.
carbon everything. And I was just like, wow. And when I got it to the house, Chris, who was the mechanic down at the bike shop, said, whatever you do, don't do anything. Don't even take it out of the box. Bring it right here. And when I got it, I called Chris. I said, I'm on my way. I think I've been duped. He said, what do you mean? I said, I don't think there's anything in here. I think I just been screwed.
It's
So I
so
bring the
light.
bike. Oh yeah. I bring it over there. He grabs it. He goes, oh shit. Opens it up, pulls it out, and there's this beautiful, pristine Bianchi. And he says, my God, Ed, this is like 16 pounds. And
Wow.
it was beautiful. And I asked the guy, I contacted him. I said, why are you selling it? And at a reasonable price. He said, because it's too dangerous for me. He said, see, I'm 65 years old and I have more money than sense. I ride on Saturday with a couple of guys and everybody's got these big bikes. I can afford a $10,000 bike. It's no big deal for me. And I went all out on this. And then it sat on the wall because I got out one day and rode it with a group of friends, and we were going down a descent, and it was so fast, and I couldn't slow it down fast enough. It scared me so bad. He said,
Wow.
so I put it on the wall, and my wife finally told me after about a year, it's time to get rid of this bike. If you're not going
Oh,
to ride it, get rid of it, and you have it. So enjoy it. And it became such I don't know if you call it a sickness or a passion, but I have now 14 bikes hanging on my bike room. I have a
yeah.
special bike
Make
room,
sure you
bro.
send me a picture of that because I want to display the
Yeah.
Bianchi. I'm gonna be honest. I never seen anybody with that many bikes, let alone that many nice bikes.
Yep. I'll show you. I have to take three pictures of the three sides, and I got more downstairs. But yeah, it's just it kind of blossomed. And then, I was sitting in class one day. I had, was looking up bike stuff, and this thing came across. It was a YouTube video uh, about Ram Race Across America, and you can't get it now. You have to buy it. You have to purchase it, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was the race where Dr. Breedlove died. He got hit by a truck, and
I'm
it's
not familiar.
oh man, it is like the number one film. I wish I could remember. It was an hour and a half long. It was
I bet if
long.
you Google that plus RAM, something will pop up.
Yeah, it will. It one of the best ones. I just don't remember the name of it, but I watched it for the whole hour and a half and I was mesmerized by it. I mean, here are these guys, and I mean, they had a Swedish girl. They woke her up and she realized that she had slept an extra hour and she was crying, hitting the RV. She's on her bike and she's smashing the RV with her hand, yelling at the crew, you motherfuckers, you let me
Solo
sleep the
rider.
next thing. Solo rider, you know? It was unbelievable. Of course, Yuri. Rorik won it that year. But Dr. Breedlove died. They had a French guy who works here in the United States, but he's French. He tried it and he actually would have made it. He gets to Ohio
Okay.
and they find out they told Rick told the crews Dr. Breedlove has been hit and he died. Now you can keep it from your rider. We won't say anything. Or you can tell your rider, that's entirely up to you, but we're not going to say anything until the race is officially over. So I don't know how this French guy figured it out, but he found out and then he was crying in the van. He said, I'm not going to do it. He says, I can't even see my family. And they're like, what do you mean? Here's your family. He says, no, I can't see them in my head. And Rurik said the same thing. You know, Yori would say, I can't see my son. I can't see him in my head. Um, but unbelievable
Wow.
film. And instead of going, wow, that's really fucked up. What a bunch of dumbasses. I sat there and said, this is what I need. I want, yeah. And
Oh,
so,
you sound like me.
oh, it was crazy. It was the most insane thing. Even mentioning Ram, nobody knew what it was here in Mississippi. I told Bob one day and he said,
Nobody knew it
you're
is here either.
crazy. Yeah, he said, son, you're nuts. What are you crazy? Just ride and enjoy. And I started doing the centuries, and that just didn't seem enough. And in order to get to Ram as a soloist, you have to qualify.
Yep.
And there's a qualifying race very close to us there in Nashville. It's called the Natchez Trace 444, 444 miles in 44 hours. And I mean,
And
I've
you've done
read
that how many times?
4 times now.
Wow.
And I love it every time I do it. This past was one of my better ones, 27 hours and second a podium. And it was just, but it was the most brutal race I've ever had. It was awful. I told Chris, I don't know how they do the math, but that's another story. Um, Best time was 26 hours. The first time we did it
That's
was
moving.
32. But we took a 2 hour sleep. We didn't need it. Well, we took it and but I learned from it, and I did that and I got the bug and just started to put together longer rides and people figure out, holy crap, this, Dr. Pasha is the one that kind of saved me with my back by giving me these back injections. And you know, I thank him every day. I said, it's because of you, I'm able to do this. He goes, no, you did it yourself. He's always been a sponsor of all these races because they're very expensive. And I've always given him credit. And here in a little town like Meridian, we got like 40,000 people that live here. Everybody knows, hey man, that cyclist, that's Ed. I have people that tell me all the time, hey, if there's a cyclist on the road, we're going to say it's Ed, even though it's not, we're just going to say it's Ed. And
I mean, you're a hometown hero, man.
I don't know about hero, but I sure am, you know, hometown knucklehead, but, I rode, when we did the solo attempt, I put together a great team of 10 folks. We had our
What
media.
what drove you to do that?
It was, it gave me peace. It was all about
I explain that. Excuse me. I understand that. Explain that for those who don't get it, who have not been.
if God stopped making roads, I don't think I'd be here. And I just hope that there's enough road for me to ride, even now, even as I feel that there's no healing. There's no like you wake up tomorrow and you're like, hey man, I have no more PTSD. I'm good. It doesn't work that way. It's always there.
Right.
The dreams, the nightmares, the constant, you know, agonizing thoughts, they're always going to be there. It's how you deal with them. Every man has a breaking point. Every man has a way to deal with stuff. Some drink, some unfortunately, take their lives. Others swallow it and they leave
Right.
it there and they're miserable to live with. For me, it's getting on that bike and riding it's funny when I ride with my group. I love my guide. I love riding with the little group that I ride with. But I'll be honest with you, I'll get 30, 40 miles into it, and I'm kind of glad when they say, okay, we'll see you later. I'm done. I don't want to ride with it. I would like riding by myself because I'm able to clear my head,
Yep.
kind of exercise all those demons, and it's the most therapeutic way that I can deal with it. And I worry about every little thing like a problem with my knee. Oh my God, what's going to happen? You know, is my back going to give up? Am I going to be able to ride when I'm 70? Can I ride when I'm 80? Because the minute I can't ride is the minute that I think I just give up, you
I
know?
understand that.
So,
It's I use this phrase control the controllables. And obviously I'm far less in age and wisdom than you, but what I found is there's very few things in life you truly can control. Now, the Army doesn't teach you this.
no,
In fact, I think the Army teaches you the opposite, to try to control everything. And I was talking with Greg about this. You know, it's like how many different enemy sit temps and contingencies do I have to come up with where it's not necessarily a bad route or method, but it's like we're gonna just go right back to Battle Drill 1 Alpha and react to contact and shit hits the fan. So what the fuck are we doing here? Like, how much stress do I have to put on myself to attempt to influence so many things that I really have no control over?
right,
But if I can control, on the bike, I can control my cadence, my power, my nutrition, and this. And that's about it. And then everything else, I just kind of, it is what it is. The
right.
weather's going to be what the weather's going to be. Traffic's going to be what traffic's going to be. The hills are going to be there when they're there. Like, whatever. Just let it go.
Well, I think what you've built has helped me out. When I DNF'd at Ram, when you called, which would have been about almost a
Probably
week.
July, give or
Yeah, it
take.
was. Yeah, it was a week after had gotten home because we had to drive back.
Yep.
And I'm looking at the chair that I was sitting on. I'm sitting on that chair reading, and you call, and I'm like, okay, and and when you said because you had told me earlier, while you were getting ready to do Raw, Race Across the West, you said, look, I want to let you know something. When you get into the desert, I want you to tuck all of those, you know, all of those demons underneath a rock or underneath a cactus and just leave them there. And I'm looking forward to hearing you when you reach New Jersey. And I did that. I was able to, and it was just like a calmness came over me. The desert, as difficult as it was, and people said it was the desert that caused my, lung infection. I don't think so. Whatever it is, it is. But the desert is, especially at night, to me
Mm-hmm.
was the most peaceful. And I loved going through there, and I loved the solace, and I loved the quiet. And there was nobody there. It's just you and your thoughts, and it was magical. Is the best way to put it. And that's and I get a high off that, and that's what I'm looking for when I go ride. There's certain roads I ride on that I love going on because I get that same peace. And I don't like being there with other riders. It's fun to ride with guys and get in a pace line and or a peloton and goof around a little bit, and that's fine. We talk, but they know they're great athletes, great riders. All of them are Ironman and whatnot, and but they also know that you know after 30, 40 miles, they're done, and they know I'm going to go on. Uh, but it is. It's the only thing that gives me the peace that I really need. And when you called that day and said we want you to be on the Rusty Dogs of War, my first reaction is if you're fucking with me, because you remember I asked you that. I said, look, man, I don't want to,
Yes, I do.
invest in this and then, you find somebody that's better, which you could in a minute. You can throw a rock and find somebody that's a better rider than me.
Uh,
I don't need that. I said, please, this is like second life to me. And it really was. And meeting all you guys, that was the biggest thing, meeting everybody. And I tell this story. I recently talked to the Rotary Club, and I said this very thing when we met the first time, which was at Borrego Springs for the World Championships. I said, Thursday we all got together and Chris cooked for us, and we were talking about we didn't want to eat out because we were afraid we might eat something that would be bad. So what would you all like? And that's when I said Chris is a great cook, and he cooked all day. And sitting around that table, not talking about war stories, just talking. It was so good to be around guys like me and and most of the time I was just listening or I'd make a joke or something. And then that night when I went to bed, I slept like a baby. And I told the guys, I said, at the Rotary Club, I said, it's the first time that I had such a sound sleep that when my alarm went off, I couldn't, but I didn't even know where I was. And
Wow.
and then Friday, that morning we wake up and Chris is cooking. And after we have the flag, I don't know if you want to call it a ceremony or memorial.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a bit of both.
yeah, and you grabbed me and said it's your turn to, talk about Harper. And man, it was just powerful. So it just, to be a part of something, that's another thing I think vets need to know. It's so important to be a part of a group that is understanding, that knows what you've been through. That's the most important thing. You know, I'm the commander of Post 12-12-4, the VFW post, and I love being a part of that post more now than ever. Uh, and I always tell guys that, when I talk about recruiting and if you want to join, even with like Greg, you're not old enough. I really truly believe that. I think if you're 30 or 40, you know, a lot of guys don't want to join the VFW because they think it's just drinking beer, talking war stories. And that's not what it's all about. It's actually just the opposite. Our mission in the VFW is not just to simply recruit, although that's a big part of it. Our mission is to take 65% of all the money that we gather and to, give it to outreach programs for vets. And when I became commander, I've been there. This is my third year, third, going on my fourth year. And I was kind of shocked at, that they would pick me. And so one of the things I told them, I said, look, because you have to accept it. And I stood up in front of the group and I said, look, here's the deal. I, I know there was talk a couple weeks ago that we obviously we have to pick a new commander. And my name got jacked up in the pot. I understand that. I get it. I said, but this is what I'm going to suggest. I said, one, I really think in order to be a good commander, you need to do it for 2 years. You can't do anything you could sit on your ass for a whole year talking what you want to do and not coming up with really any particular goals. But with 2 years, you can actually get things done. I said, the other thing is, if I'm doing a bad job, I need to be replaced immediately. Not, okay, we'll just wait to April and then replace them. No, immediately. I mean, my feelings won't get hurt. If I piss somebody off, I'm not doing the job, you don't think I'm doing the job, get rid of me. Don't leave me hanging around. Okay.
Right.
And I said, and the third thing, and probably the most important, every commander from this point forward needs to have some kind of a legacy, some type of footprint, something that he or she has done that better enriched, the post or the VFW or veterans as a whole. Have to. Okay. And everybody kind of looked at me like, you want to do this shit for 2 years? I said, not really, but if you want somebody that's going to be good, you have to. And so that was it. It was unanimous. I was chosen, and then the shit hit the fan, and everything was like, holy shit, you know? So I told him after about 2 months in the saddle, I said, okay, I've got an aggressive plan. I said, and it's aggressive, and it's probably going to take a long time, maybe even as much as a decade. But it's when we talk about what's going to be your legacy, I want this to be it. I said, we have an opportunity to, there's houses that are being demolished around the city of Meridian.
Okay.
And I said, we can get those houses. I know the mayor. He's a friend of mine. And, I knew him before he was mayor, and I've already talked to him. The senator is a former student of mine, and we've already talked about this as well. He's a state senator, state representative. Um, and Jeff Tate, great guy. And when I told him my idea, he says, "Man, I was just talking to the attorney, no, the lieutenant governor in a meeting, and he told me that you got to do something for vets in your area, and this is perfect. So here's my plan." I said, "I want to take a couple of these houses. We won't have to do a lot of the work because we have other people like MCC has, it's a community college. They have an entire carpentry class, a
Mm,
building class. That's what they do. Electricians. We can get them all. We can do like a Habitat for Humanity, only it'd be for vets. We can build these houses, refurbish them a little bit. They may not need much. Refurbish them, and
give these
then
kids some
we
practical
choose.
skills.
Yeah, and we give it to someone, a veteran or his family that's hurting, someone that is maybe living in an apartment, and we give them a house, or somebody that's homeless
Right,
with the understanding that they have a responsibility, that we're not, I don't want to take it away from them, but there'll be some stipulations. You have to have a job. And if you
right,
don't have a job, then your job's going to be, cutting our grass. And we have Wesley House that we take care of across the street, another charitable organization. We cut their grass every 2 weeks. You have to do that too. We can keep them gainfully employed. We just don't want to run the house. And everybody was in agreement with it. So, I mean, that'll be, but that's the things that we need to do. Join anybody, you don't necessarily have to ride 3,000 miles across the country. There's other groups that you can join that you feel so welcomed, you know. If anybody out there is suffering, I was in New Orleans not too long ago, and he wasn't wearing his hat, but he was a Navy vet, and I could tell his hat was in his box. And I looked at him and I leaned down and I said, gave him, I had $20. I gave him, I said, look, there's a place for you. Let me take you to it. And in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, Camp Shelby, there's a old Army Navy store. They sell duds and stuff.
right.
And it's two brothers that own it. Their father started it, and the two brothers now own it. And it's pretty good, but they had an aggressive plan to set up, and it's now there. They have a whole bunch of land, and it took them a decade, but they built a home for veterans. I think it has like 30 beds, 30 rooms. You have your
Wow.
own private room, your own private bathroom. Um, and they run it, and it's there. So I leaned in and I told him, I said, I can bring you there right now. Let me, we'll get something to eat and we'll go. And he looked at me, he says, I know that place. And he said, I'm not gonna go. I'm here. I'm not ready to go. I said, this is not a good place for you to be, brother. I'm begging you, come on with me. Let's go. Well, all I could do was give him $20 and hope he didn't drink it. But, those are the saddest stories, but you know, those are, there are places out there. And like I said, you don't have to ride a bike. You could there's posts, VFW posts, and all over the country, all over the world. We have them in Germany, join and be a part of it. Be with people that you don't have to do anything. You don't even have to really, hell, most of our members don't even come to the meetings, but they know they're a part of something. So, that's kind of my story, other than I'm old.
No, that's beautiful. So I'm going to finish every interview with two things. One, who would you like for me to interview next? Who would you recommend?
What do you mean from our team?
No, anybody. So I've already interviewed Greg,
Yeah.
but this could be somebody that you know that obviously I don't. Make the introduction. We go from there. Um, and my second question, you get to the end of your life. Everything you've said, written, done is is no more. What is your final piece of advice? Whether that be to your old soldiers, to your son, to your students, what would that be?
I think the final thought I'd always, especially when it pertains to my son, my students, guys I served with, is that they made me the person I am today, and I love them dearly. Um, Man, I love them. I miss them, and I'll miss them. I don't fear death. I never really have. When your time is up, your time is up. Um, but I will miss them, miss being with them. That's the things I think, I like. And then, I'd want them to know how much they meant to me and how much I truly love them. As far as somebody to interview, you know, Kevin is like one of my oldest friends, you know, and I don't know if you were going to interview him or not. And I
Well, I
don't,
think I can line up
yeah,
Mr.
I
Kevin.
mean, I lost two really, really dear, dear people, that I used to talk to a lot. Uh, David Detzer, Dr. Detzer, who I showed you. The other guy was George Combs. If I could ever have anybody to interview, it would be him. George had childhood diabetes, so he could never serve.
Right.
Um, we became friends in college at Western Connecticut. He was he's like Kevin, a unbelievable genius. Uh, he he was going to Columbia, an Ivy League, and 2 years into it said, "I'm tired of school." And realizing he needed money, he goes to a private school and teaches, lied. This is before internet. Told him he had a degree from Columbia, and he's teaching. He was teaching for 2 years until he left and went back to school. And I'm like, "How did you do that, man?" He said, "Man, I don't know." He said, "I love teaching." Um, we were close. God, if you could have interviewed anyone, it would, golly, I used to call him. I mean, I'd be three sheets to the wind, and I would call him. It'd be 2 in the morning, and he told me, you call me anytime. I'm always up, he said. And I would call him drinking a beer. And man, just we would have these deep discussions about because he knew. And Kevin's the same way. Kevin knows because I told him. He knows because he's the only one that I showed the pictures to. I wouldn't show those pictures to anybody. I didn't take them. We were ordered to, anytime we got into an engagement, we were, this is when those little tiny silver digital cameras came out.
Right,
We had to take pictures
right.
in
For the
case,
storyboards or whatever.
I guess, no one ever really explained why.
Little
And so
CYA in there, I'm sure, as well.
I guess, but always make sure that the weapons were exposed, that you could see the weapons. So, which was, I'm not even gonna get into that. I don't want to get in any trouble, but I remember that we would give these pictures over to S3. And I remember walking into one of the bulb meetings, battalion meetings, and these little shits sitting there looking at all these damn images. Look at this dude. Look at the, oh man, check this out. And I'm thinking, man, those were missions that we were on. Those are things, the fuck you, what are you looking at? And it's almost like they were ghouls and they were
Right.
using them as their own trophies. I'm like, you motherfuckers. And so the only way you could get out of taking those images, those pictures, is if it was still hot and you had to go to the rendezvous point. And so that was the only time. And so I told my guys, we're done taking pictures. How can you get around it? We're going to get in trouble. No, we're not. You know why? We're just going to tell them it was too hot to sit there and stop and take pictures. And we're just going to go. And that was the end of it. That was the end of taking pictures. Now we were going to, of course we were going to, provide aid and, medical aid and all that shit, stuff that we needed. But I wasn't taking any more of those fucking pictures. And Kevin and George are the only two people on earth that have ever seen those pictures. So I guess Kevin would be the one to interview if you had to, you know.
Absolutely. I think he would be a great interview.
Yeah,
And man, Ed, I just appreciate you. You're one of my favorite people.
man, I love you
And
too, brother. I'm telling you, man, everything has, it's all blessed by God. I mean, you guys have been great. If it wasn't for you calling me that day, this would have haunted me to the day I died. The fact that I didn't finish Ram, you know.
well, I thought I was the longest waiting in the group. And when you told me at the boardwalk that you've been waiting even longer, I was like, shit, I
9 years.
got nothing to complain about. Wow.
Well,
So,
it was tough. It was because it would have, they set up like a military little they took one of my military uniforms at the school and they set up like a little shadow box that we have. Anyways, it's really nice looking. Greg got to see it last summer.
okay.
And but they have a map of the United States. And every time I rode by there, I'd take my finger, and follow it and say, I'm going across the country. And I would say, okay, 3 months, 2 months, 1 month. And then when I got back to school that August, the map didn't mean the same. Now I walk by and I'm like, fuck it. That's where I DNF'd. And now I walk through it this last August and I looked at it and I said, completed. The whole map. Every time I look at it, I know every state that we've been through and now it's completed. But look, I love you. I can't wait to see how many more
I
miles you
salute you, Top.
get. Yes,
Thank you.
sir.
I appreciate you. And I look forward to being together again soon.
Hopefully, I know I've already got time. We're going to be up there in Borrego Springs, and Kathy's actually going to come. We're all going to go together,
Oh, that's
and so
beautiful. I can't
she could
wait to meet
help.
her.
Yeah, she can help with giving out water and stuff. So
Thank you, sir. Thank you for
love
your
you,
time.
man.
I love you
Yep,
too. Have a blessed weekend.
I will. Bye now.
All right. Bye bye.